Sounds about right. What?
Have you seen Brenda Kelley this morning?
But I'm not.
You seen DK?
No.
Have you seen Brandon Kelley?
Still not.
I don't know what's happening with him. You may want to go work here. He's not leaving here. Nobody's seen.
At the
Some big deputies there.
I don't know. He's holding an iPad, looking very official. I'm not saying that it won't be my first choice, but he probably will get the job done.
Yes, and we take a bus.
Oh, yeah, I'll watch it. I was just curious, because I think there's like one a day from here to there.
That sounds right. Go find one for phone, go find one for home. If we win, will you leave your wife? I would not. Please.
Hey, bro. How are you, buddy? You look surprisingly functional.
An hour of sleep.
I was gonna say, again, you look surprisingly functional.
It was really good. I like tricked myself into like actually thinking I got some sleep.
Well, I am impressed by your
I don't know, that's what you were.
tricking skills, I guess.
I was so surprised.
Well, I had made note of BK in the notes, but I forgot about the other guy.
I
How did we get here? I was picturing you biking here. All right, let's do it.
We're missing Jordan.
Yeah.
See if I can see that.
No worries. We will not start with that. I mean, we could. Doesn't seem like a great idea.
This is the one I'm like. That's our actual
Yeah. He's got 9 minutes to get here.
There's another restaurant.
Oh, right.
Here, the back.
I didn't realize that. I love that everyone is staggered.
Hey, well.
Beijing's Proliferation is set up actions, point first, immediate military action in the Pacific, back papers, Beijing, massive military release, the virtual land station, conflict in Beijing, we got the worst of it, the level of the Canadian, make Thomas, the worst of the United States, is a little bit of the station, the station, the what's the stuff of these making serious, the battle station, shooting teacher, but the sky is going to say what every community, the indicator believe possibly the war might be, would be the release of power, broke out, China is simply that's our comment is well, if you can also like you believe in the balance, and if you're trying to go for changes, I consider probably population program, or some of the kind of relationship I can tell you, the fact that I don't war on the message with the state of the research, creates Germany sending warships for the SES information, we got the aggressive China companies attacking them, exploding and shooting over the Civic and actual fucking nuclear shooting over China, the China back are proliferating themselves, which is was their reaction, the Europe's exploration dangerous to Ukraine as well as Western America, like the G-Men and the Ukrainians found that the European future struggle with, and also the European Mercury, for now for decades, for trying to attack one idea, and China's cry for violence. B, risk tolerance. It is growing in small scale disputes. U.S. an obligation to the Pacific compels intervention must already for them. This risk of war versus China. As will be served, the country has responsibility to make a competition higher than others. The problem say by NDT, region responsible to take a lot of response. The major to the aggressive sector China is approved by a Beijing system of dominant region response. Becoming horse responsibility when you hear the level of senior China. This case, 300 is a G's quality of restricted against Venezuela, your state aggressive military structure to speed escalate military force. The Thomas will use this maritime transit cultural fishing energy. Since probably the escalation. C, primacy. China and U.S. fit with the city's model that guarantees unforeseen confident ability. Watkins in 24 U.S. China doesn't the battle of the land legally realized expectations for national there's a duty to have the plan model for China. The battle will cause the animation and believe other nations ready to the mission over our national security over the then 150 million motivation regain the Pacific return by the threat is far as the significant less than this display. The wall of China aggressive to distract from the all the time. The China goes to the aircraft carriers 124 times less than security displaying in the shadow of the for land security. The U.S. security is you offering things to call it. Don't be big calling the neighbor carriers without checking the duration of course. The knowledge and order of system of carriers at the table strategy. The synthetic conflict and response over for carrier. The should be single carrier loss of creative and Forces of back and forth being behind the single make us understand the cycle of requirement. Now American people keep this around the technology. The reality for the world power theory how to nuclear incidents, even without full scope of conflict. This is the high risk of accidental nuclear crisis which we done in 2018 in Washington. This is the use of force with discovery. And the Washington judge for the mission but communication for communication. The register for long-term preparation also is a original country. This opportunity over the ASS for example, military action. The president plays other space on the ECC. The unintended economy for reinforcement of the concern escalation. The nuclear escalation of the list of the China. And the accident by concern, no war states limited, even if the U.S. doesn't have nuclear level security interests. And the smallest skirmishes, wars between great powers expand horizontally and escalate. And then 24. Wars between them really short, so they often expand horizontally. Another reason they were released on the war between U.S. and China horizontally right now. The government with the U.S. European abilities to other by multiple division. But the determination back and forth is going to obviously the U.S. as well. But Western is often is the enemy of the United States war now. But the first thing is go explore horizontally to the nuclear return. This represents the nuclear change track. Escalation manager. Premise 2, the U.S. would not use nuclear the U.S. would use nuclear weapons first. In a full-scale conventional conflict, the U.S. would lose the war due to military and foreign conflict. Limited nuclear first, swinging in 21. The U.S. would conflict including war. National conflicts in their not east would victory. U.S. would operating works of the air missile transmission time and the war fighting over the day. Conventional China was security and within more finally. No joining completely constant the security China. And these missiles can drop in one U.S. tank operating at the enemy. And the use likely kind of identity and national security. And the China forces would continue to obviously well as ICS only victory. And the second keep use of ships and bases and anti-nuclear power. The whole world there's but of most unity and escalation for their goal never to reach settled with snake action keepers states act Russian so they do not nuclear supernormal. And then more people like suggest. But even if small military incidents even small military incidents could tempt U.S. damage limitation and nationalistic. The nuclear powered Chinese army cannot be deterred by nuclear. Round in 21, Kelley Orton, and of course, the local popular family you see the abilities to produce for nuclear ordering these maybe there's not nuclear organizations. There's probably necessary to use more data competent. There's not the use of sector able to deal with except rigorous. China not being division tower condition missiles over paper they will then use the really more information and China. No low risk of solid system are really as much as China as the citizens and the response China no risk of preventing technique hard to use and literally use it just like our forces work to use it. Another state focus for China on the force in the food chain of Caesars as required. The word then no speed. China uses the same knowledge change measure all the technology for running. The opponents will not be used instead of restrict helping escalation. The China measure physics and religious going to the more conflict control remotely. The second conflicts, even if the U.S. does not lose the war, Chinese alternate response options. Clearly in a crisis cause U.S. nuclear coming in 19 incorporate areas control operation other military culture. To the effect of moving to escalate this other prevention something control always okay. The Chinese nuclear system of marking entry and pressure time. Monetary tools system return to the response to use that technology nuclear structure and China forces. The European countries buffer our regular switch requirements. Opting negotiate U.S. China conflict causing cheap control and very force the China regulatory and Chinese manual corporation and research and activities moving to Canadian nuclear collaboration. That would cause nuclear war to the legitimate economy. In the first country, act the adversary, thus the United States should not use nuclear weapons first again. The People's Republic of China, contention to a solvency. The risk of first strike is extremely high. Only then if you can solve an issue, you're confident in the weak. The risk of senior use of physical aggression first strike. Use the nuclear regional instability from escalating or solving the bomb. The charge of resources cost probably the answer. The investigation is used one thing that goes when you believe it. And one of the other words is rise of Chinese are raising for the economy by the actual fundamental on the system. And this is the power of what I once they use these shit won't begin asking rapidly every day. And then you will have to strike this you cannot find. Then you track the regulation of likely to get or basis likely to be right. Use missing each other very small and nuclear weapons beyond and strike first. Not nuclear deterrence cannot solve the advantage. It's not about perception. China only cares about conventional match they believe nuclear threats. The uncritical can only deter US intervention. That's what I use nuclear weapon for nuclear attack deterrence. Anything you can go to the military attacks based on the belief nuclear can that. Even when they use or out of future use one without limitation of military action. It is not critical power against future conventional attack. We need to try to be able to eliminate use category. Nuclear cannot be future conventional attack. People this military command. With future regional so the US China they can oversee. No that should be looking to our relation with the possible attack conventional without solidity. Once all of the US escalation control that is subject to China. The US is coordinating the economy US and China the strategy was of the attack China calculation. The use of force the perception conventional knowledge is cannot nuclear attack conversation. But the causing the conventional action US conventional China likely to avoid China from nuclear use conventional advantage simply attack more quickly. The prevent the course use of the competition effect. This will now force the US to use China uses when making the conventional should be avoided equipment now. After conventional can be overconfidence. The Chinese strategic community this insular and overwhelmingly believes the US will not use nuclear weapons or coming up. In the 19 China places the future control of the US escalation could be in the audio escalated by US. Now I see the conventional credits and going to the nuclear attack. US getting however unwanted escalation China making nuclear nuclear after by using those preparations for the we second for this policy to the Soviet sub the website. And the text is open when countries suffer nuclear attack will use nuclear security. And single use could easily be lost on this security. Skeptic one time here. And the numbers is trying to confident overseas make a West African records for escalation China. And we can comment about a little bit of what escalation attack fit. And the use of any nuclear at a conventional level China. Waging nuclear weapons operation of the and then decoding and cutting nuclear section on the weapons separate. And my son explained this over China over the control of adversary over I see nuclear triad Chinese competition of new base nuclear force locks in usual ability for Chinese players. That risk escalation from the US side. Looking at 23, China versus nuclear conventional trade isolation characters. New nuclear threats as two powers for Chinese missile industry. The pressure China use of force is shown in the conventional trade attack. That's what we use nuclear threats as secret secret control companies to use MNG. And escalation as a super and this is different to one. And the summer is the process of one. And that's the as a basic about the basic things more crazy. That China's force has to get in risk. Only the US would use a nuclear weapon first. China unconditionally adheres to their enemy will wait until terrestrial detonation to retaliate. Then any contingency tells us something good. China's never survived. And controversial atomic counter versus to not do. As well as with our leader in the fifth China said that the first use was not make the video to China whatever. We go to the China knowledge. The first use of the organization of the China nuclear school absolute China. Nuclear to China to China that the leader of the defense of the station. And see based on China modernization CC research about the expect. And it's China time sees to avoid a business or must play with the field of operation. Open emphasis to the respond after its way. And then finish when the Chinese leader over local incident. This is such a great copy of the first use of prior incident. Very good such a kind of such a investment in public and the first use remains liability. Even if willing China does not have the proportionate capabilities to strike first and are only likely to develop in reaction to US versus China. And then 24 China's market organization believes in terms of sector because this is little other confessed with the war to do so. Not a range of convention most of the like every one of these of other leader. The China is making their decision as well as China. You are ever beginning for sure the one of the very like you said. No way how we should trust the organization. It's just us still not have to particularly no one knows what I end up getting very small. And the US and the leadership investigation policy the one that in terms of the versus China what the US will come out as their first event. You will also see that the leadership can offer fair reducing money. Should more likely the Chinese from the also with question. You want to turn I'll see your section or back. I have 30 seconds. First advantage, the U.S. would go nuclear for only 16 years US and America from the continued invasion of China carries 1% power they or power loss, which are any missile can carry nuclear warhead here. China kind of people has launching a 50 missile. In the minutes of launching a missile ability to escalate China, not the records are called nuclear retaliation US and China. Likes the secrets of make institutions unless they always are records of manipulating and then use or receive and use currently SSS attack and terror can carry with US.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you want this card first?
Not particularly.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, why won't China use first in the conventional war?
So that tell us there's a few reasons. One, white papers say that they've said that they would never use a nuclear weapon. Two, capabilities. Their nuclear weapons and their current modernization are all used for survivability. They don't have tactical nuclear weapons to use first. And they know that those are the two things. Like they
Okay.
said they will not.
Do they think, or does the United States know that China would not use first? Like, do we trust that they wouldn't?
The United States does not trust China's NFU.
We do not trust China's NFU? Okay. Is the plan announced publicly?
Probably.
Probably, yes or no, please.
Probably.
How come probably?
We're not going to say no link to your DAs. The plan isn't public.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. Is the plan like adopted in the NPR? Like, should not use nuclear weapons first? Just kind of an oral statement, not like a policy Like,
Again,
tell me what the plan looks like.
Again, probably, we will say that there is an NFU for your dissent, but when you read counter plans that are probably not competitive, we are not going to give you competition for that as long as
Okay. The piece of Beckley and Brand's evidence cites, I think, like the places that says it would go nuclear, like Taiwan, the South China Sea. Is there something I'm missing? Is there anywhere else?
Japan, India, Taiwan.
Those are like a list of countries. Why do those things go nuclear?
Well, I mean, it's a list of countries where we have evidence that says all of those go nuclear. We've also read.
Wait, how do you solve India going nuclear? Because that'd be between India and China, right?
The U.S. would strike in a conflict. We've read.
Why? India's not a U.S. ally. Why do we give a shit?
Well, yes, we've said that wars expand outwards. The current evidence is that wars don't stay limited because even if we don't have like defense pacts like we do with the Philippines, we do have sort of like untangible alliances with the U.S. has said. India. There's an inevitable hegemonic interest between the two countries, which means that they get dropped.
Okay, walk me through the process of like China sinks an aircraft carrier, the U.S. uses a tactical nuke on the Chinese mainland.
So the card we just read in the Sweeney evidence says there are two reasons. One is that it would cause a credibility dilemma as bad as the Iraq War because it would kill American soldiers, especially because we think that our carriers are a really powerful signal inside of the region. The second thing, so it's like one, loss of strength, two, projects.
Why would China conventionally strike U.S. military bases?
In order to take advantage of conventional conflict.
Why would China want an advantage in a conventional conflict and continue to fight if their economy is declining?
Well, we read about Brand's evidence that says they're desperate, which is with motivation to go to war because it can help them.
They think that it could help them? Why do they think that?
Well, like drums up the public, war is good for the economy, stuff like that. Like
Okay.
they're nationalists, they're not exactly caring about the people who are affected by like the real estate bubble.
Okay. Is your argument about damage limitation that United States policy obligates us to damage limit, or that we have an incentive to?
We don't have an obligation to damage limit. We do for deterring limited nuclear attacks with limited
And
strikes.
how could we damage limit China without ICBMs? Just sit there.
Where's the sun? It's 6 on the case. Gene, you good?
Yes, okay, I'm good now.
Panel, you all good? First off, the election says that Biden wins now. Negorni and Rosenberg 4-3. Biden wins the video. Trump, the cosmic mistake has been overestimating the strength polling will associate things are today. Please vote. Overestimating polling should do too much. We have all of the instrument data that's available. Post just Biden's control overstating the evidence has been underperformed early primary states. 3% of the Republican coalition thought it was supporting Trump. The plan flips voters would result in massive attack as it received as weakness. In terms of the case, House 22 pressing considering how the people react very quickly. Typical voters top representatives can see the Americans vulnerable to anybody attack as right tells what politics want to see supporting the vulnerability of Congress will take note loudly disagrees with additional funding. China will receive mixed signals and whether the next declarations wanted to away from being discarded. That perception has Trump the election first 23. A new war could be an inflection point amid the Ukraine Taiwan area. Says that Beijing Moscow Tehran aligned as Americans with isolation so would change the narrative juxtaposition. One party saying with the government, another knows what he's doing. How Biden has this process can make a significant difference. Of course, well, people wait for a similar leadership respectively. Independent voters who undecided Trump 24 causes new war. Biden solves it. Kill 24 access into risk. A crucial factor whether China disrupted full-scale crisis unravel not political first election. Events leading to nuclear Ukraine and Taiwan but Trump a ton of skeptical attention to provide a clue how he crisis with China no go. Russia arms control provide avoiding place and arms Biden a time pursued risk reduction to Iran as one of MBT avoiding for crisis provide diplomacy a reactive nuclear provide nuclear development renewed talks required the collaboration with leadership. It's the most important factor that turns our first control of the war. Biden prevents China war from escalating with January 24. Trump's stylistically chaotic instruction Biden pushing carefully a choreographed diplomacy administration prevented accidents or strategy narrative on terrorism return facing close calculated on Taiwan. Trump intimated he would not defend the island where Trump to return consequences persevered. Tax the United States should disqualify Donald Trump from presidency under the 14th Amendment disqualification clause that solves letting in try 23. The efforts to overturn the election place currently the disqualification clause. Next off is policy in NFU. No first use policy forbids first use against any atmosphere under any condition. Evans 21 states that have no first use policy when it use against an atmosphere keys only for retail. Adopting no first use requires a declaration lacking 84 to adopt a policy. A no first use can make a declaration to be prepared as use for secret refuse to declare yet to not using first vote NEG substance and secret to justify infinite carve-outs and strike stable legal ground for core generics. Next, offensive advantage counterplan. The United States should restart military communication channels between the United States and the People's Republic of China and public reiterate its longest word for Taiwanese independence. It's believed that Taiwan's peaceful communication needs to be resolved by Taipei and Beijing as part of an effort to reach a high-level diplomatic agreement with the People's Republic of China that commits the People's Republic of China to peaceful reunification. Communication solve miscalculation. Fingers 23 serious discussions of rest and downward trajectory. Leaders must declare strategic intent and reservations as during communication to risk miscalculation neither Pentagon nor PLA anxious for conflict. It's time to get back. Managing the Chinese tensions during recommitment to peaceful reunification solves Taiwan. Master 23 America avoiding war over Taiwan through details and resources not to let U.S. a recommit to that the only China Taiwan we're going to differences in Beijing from the U.S. military Russian ability to rhetoric providing legislation that help reassuring China will require a bit about Biden to reiterate the U.S. It's not for Taiwan independence or peaceful reunification that Taiwan's face up to Taipei Beijing peaceful dialogue in the combination of the set of precedent the U.S. and China reach a high level agreement with war giving space a work towards peaceful reunification Washington space and prevent unification literature doesn't have through force snack off in South Korea is that the United States should increase nuclear contingency planning by at least incorporating conventional planning with South Korea strengthen its cooperation with the nuclear consultative group commit to consultation regarding nuclear use on the Korean Peninsula. Recent policy shifts bolstered assurance with the kind of strengthens it mitigating anxieties further. Mount 320 Muslim individuals Biden crystals that go on use on the peninsula. A promise U.S. never explicitly offered to standing officials has a U.S. umbrella officials when a credible defense of non-nuclear options consultative group held exchange the new channel integral to trigger officials and sole common sense have a saying whether U.S. use nuclear commitment is not trivial. A system especially valuable for virtual systems in place for would be properly consult with more robust institutions the process the more prevent and allies should rehearse and publicize the constitution for ensure countries make the most important decisions. South Korean proliferation is late now. The plan's abdication of nuclear coordination sparks regional proliferation. Follows 1220 Yale bring nuclear source to mainstream publics on the side and no comprehensive political legal justification that march the Washington Declaration shares to make in favor of the use of nuclear conduct. A joint planning of new contingencies reinforced provided incentivize agreement and NDT sharing cognition dramatically based on partial U.S. survival. A transactional rebalancing expensive collective security negative advocacy of nuclear upper hand messages for the U.S. Friendly proliferation resistance with miscalculation with disastrous consequences most honored disagreements which includes the declaration was features of abandonment that is magnified by the unpopularity of NFU towards China. Harvey 19 alliances and centerpiece are critical in ensuring allies extending the proliferation of military power countries to that border and adversaries and NFU's being extended to her so precedent increases in nuclear presence also confidence the U.S. movement causes a combination with crucial adversaries that so have latent new capabilities any wavering could cause allies use nukes as made of things so NFU known officials consult the war countermeasures used to not adopt NFU proliferation cascades preventive strikes a global nuclear war extinction a moon and Shin 23 chance for access legislation high given arms system command is attack controls lost winner will lose enemy one time guys are one with ignored fragility amplified Ahsoka goes through the doors for level down nuke acceleration access to glass become a real way that catch up consequences reduce ability to use special person with race with major attention to try versus in a state of possible troublesome nuclear domino China's Russia counter panel will justify nukes has materials attack competence and financial capabilities. Next off is the risk review counterplan. The United States federal government should not use nuclear weapons first against the People's Republic of China through and all hazardous catastrophic risk review. The counterplan results in a better version of the plan reviewed prior to adoption. In terms of effective nuclear decision making, otherwise tech complexity kills that solvency. Could be 21. The quantum tech cyber weapons, AI, defects, and ground source other nuke CNC emerging tech. Imagine decision makers ability to make a nuclear decision based on the worst case scenarios where the impact of accurate tech on nuclear decision making insights complexities of benchmark seconds first step to solutions catastrophic risk review prevents extinction and all hazard approaches key perms fail. Test support 23 each global catastrophe nukes and climate epidemics and seconds please whether prevention from counter terrorization growth and percentage share conscious from the state societal functions critical infrastructure health system foods and governance effective efficient method for reducing catastrophic risk all hazard approach would take tackling mission holistically managing threats as a whole impacting competence teams of energy program which will save energy resources providing with best of one giving community benefits reducing catastrophic risk the advantage. 1. War is not inevitable. A. China is not declining. Military action is not the same as war. China is not believing Windows opportunity. 1. 24. U.S. about China's research is coexistent, concerned about growth, and independent a questionable premise that the U.S. and China resolution is narrow window. China is far from being a global period. The U.S. is having strengthening. Ties with the as well as Asian countries is slowing growth is not surprising. IMF forecasts China's GDP will increase. We're working ways to not disappointing advanced economies will increase 1.4%. China's economy is room to expand and tech socio-economic China countries. China has been problems with strengths for the concern of slowing growth. Attack Taiwan, there's no historical basis to change that advisors not happier. You concluded that its horizon is never deemed has with Russia and Iran. Building influence propagating sense in one way, but China's accumulated potential powers not so evident that CCP is already served the closing window of opportunity. How China's great rejuvenation. The U.S.-China relationship is to be centered by arbitrary broadland. Debating whether a powerful China has expanded window, and objective for likely to generate analytical glass prudent policy. B. Conventional war is not inevitable. Risks are too high for both sides. Job 23. China's not ready for war. Not coordinated and lack strategy facing random investment, including corruption in the military. Chief. There is a pandemic and consequences in the economic country areas that taking military actions to destroy China to presidency ambitions in China and the new economy military not strong enough and not among the 100 regions for capital use military funding grows up. At the end of 13 million, China's 230 comprehensive powerful far behind considering quality and overall strength as well as alliances and China's not going to accommodate when it works areas close against suicide mission to go to war like sufficient actual exercises with U.S. experience and soldiers will not as sacrifice of China's leaders to peaceful resolution to be part of remains the first choice. China and U.S. association diplomatic measure. China has a few allies. China will lose more than the competition. U.S. relations to be top priority for China. C. Tensions will be managed, especially in the SCS Code 24 SES downhill. U.S. elevated ties, but China and Ghana sufficient to code of conduct, flurry high-level meetings, in China and the U.S. on the cusp of high-level military communications, mutual desire to stabilize relations for intentions for boiling over, not least the SES, increase in actions below the force of Beijing, calculated we come to play the long game, other two parties silent this, works like support to be fully cognizant of the risks involved in premeditated conflict that will continue to remain mindful of tensions in a confrontation. D, the Thucydides trap is wrong, but C, 20, the Thucydides trap is misleading, not historically flawed, China's unlikely to pursue conflict, with more cautious, strategic China's approach, involves as well as diplomacy, China show awareness that aim for odds economies are intertwined, globalization, transformed IR, the trap is based on assumptions the system no longer exists, and highly networked, the order interests of corporations cannot be overlooked, traps Eurocentric, less on, the antagonist narrative root of mistaken understanding of China's interest to US, and not find a persuade allies at word and nowhere, I can try to find a number of fronts simultaneously from India to SES makes the trap unhelpful, E, no Taiwan invasion, on side of 24, an alarm, low progress without consideration, low baseline, having except for change forecast, still overestimate military issues, political actions, that doesn't matter, semiconductor supply chains loss, truly like number of worker results, such as China, harder, China's not taken into account, should further subtract from risk, F, obviously would not attack Japan, history demonstrates that, G, obviously would also not attack India, that's wars are ongoing now, they typically do not escalate, proof by them fighting with sticks and clubs, 2, the US would not use nukes first in a conflict, 8, damage limiting to China would make negative sense, blocking 23 is highly likely, US would use nukes to try to destroy and degrade China's nuclear forces that would require large-scale attack over refugee the mainland would have catastrophic impacts and unpredictable consequences, US allies believe the threats to use force to prevent conventional force. B, the US has never thought about using force in a conflict, it's a good idea, Robert 20 some, see nuclear warfighting US planners have not prepared for deployment of nukes, US will brought home and destroy TNW for deployment on a very limited basis to terminate nuclear war, enemy must be employed to alter and recycle US weapons, is capable of eliminating nuclear retaliation, a supplemental nuclear capability of inconsistent deployment of reinforced resolve. C, 7 decades of conflict, disagree with them, Government 24, US 24 would not go nuclear in 7 decades of conflict, nukes have been notable for their absence of proxy wars, brain conventional industry would not be surprisingly possibly significant in planning, in the event of conflict, both sides would have a strong incentive avoiding uncontrolled escalation, fight by other means, and that would not end but could return use. 3, China all cause, they would use first, even if the US hadn't ended a few chambers in 21, question of sincerity versus analyst first, a conventional attack loss Beijing to use first, and claims it from authority publications and statements of charge, a trying to get drunk and altogether, capabilities as we can basis for an policy here. Officials believe China they said they made overseas policy involving capabilities are consistent with diversification. The regions connected reservations are covered by India and Europe. 4, conventional all cause. China views NFU as sufficient and conventional forces would cause strikes in a war involving and causing inevitable escalations on 22. For China, the US would acknowledge mutual vulnerability certainly would be insufficient. At least for a question first whether acknowledgement means acceptance, i.e. the US would not pursue capabilities out of China's deterrence. Second, is whether reassurance would be credible in implementing actions, but like incredibility limits on use of deployments of missile defenses limits on US long range, like conventional strike capabilities. Give me 2 seconds. Status quo is always a logical option.
Still conventional good?
Yep.
Okay. The elections decide, Trump causes a nuclear war. Why is the first presidency not disputed?
Because our evidence is predictive, says that a number of global hotspots are incredibly tense now. There's reasons why Biden's diplomatic, capacity, especially in arms control.
Like the hotspots that are tense then and the hotspots that are tense now. Like predictive of Trump 2.0 was also predictive of Trump 1.0.
So, for example, Kim recently functionally declared war on South Korea, for example. Iran is closer to a nuke, obviously.
First strike North Korea, so that seems like an argument for us.
That argument doesn't make any sort of sense, because that would be purely rhetorical, but also you can demonstratively see that North Korea is increasing tensions on the peninsula now. Iran, obviously the geopolitical situation now is much different in that case. China potentially is different. Europe, Russia, the Ukraine war is literally happening right now, which is not happening during the Trump administration. What do you say? Not on the advantage counterplan, but yes, on the assurance DA.
Okay. I want to go to the assurance counterplan. Increase nuclear contingency planning. Explain this plan.
So what the Mount evidence describes is the idea that the United States will increase planning with South Korea for a variety of possible conflict contingencies, where we increase the amount of planning that says, here we are going to have the most important point of that is we reintroduce conversations about the greater likelihood that the U.S. might use conventional capabilities in certain instances. I can't tell you the exact parameters of how it would play out, because obviously it'd be a complex set of negotiations with South Korea.
Now what is strengthening it mean? Like you add more people?
I'll be honest, the last 2 planks are pretty status quo descriptive. They're mainly just for you to be, if you're Trump will roll them back, etc. It sort of resolves those problems.
Okay. The preventative strikes thing, is it just like North Korea preventively strikes because they don't want South Korea?
North Korea and China.
Why would China preempt South Korea?
Because a country that they have historical tensions with, that they are literally almost right next to, is also right next to one of their closest allies, now has now attempting to sprint to a nuclear bomb.
Okay. The risk review counterplan, how does this compete?
Primarily it competes off of adopting.
Okay. Okay. Then the second. Okay.
You have to be topical.
The
So
net benefit, why does it spill over to broader risk reviews?
because the counterplan institutes a risk review process, and the plan is the test case that determines its credibility.
Have we ever done one of those before?
We've never done a catastrophic risk review, not in the way that the counterplan does. We've like done things similar, but not the counterplan.
The advantage counterplan,
Yep.
why was China say yes to the hotline?
We're actively talking about nuclear nuclear arms control with them now. They also want to equally avoid miscalculation. And you said yourself, when I see cross-sects, they potentially do not want to go to a nuclear war. So obviously they would accept a CBM that prevents that from occurring.
Alright, I'm sending it out. Alright, should be sent. While everybody's waiting to get it, the advantage, or excuse me, the order is advantage, topicality, risk analysis, counterplan, the advantage counterplan, elections, DA, assurance, DA.
What was the order?
Risk analysis, then the advantage counterplan.
Sorry, I can reopen my emails. Give me a second. Oh, I just can't connect to the apparently. Any confidence?
Both y'all got it?
Gordon's email is
Yeah.
not
My internet
cooperating.
is dying for some reason. Did you save it in a folder?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can plug it in Dropbox.
But that's your,
That's my
that was the first topic, but it is in there. I got some.
Okay, I'm now good.
Okay, and panel is all good? Okay, great.
They've dropped a couple of warrants for conflict being inevitable. One is carriers that will be struck by trying to neutralize U.S. power and diversity. That's a likelihood evidence. Two is access to server systems, cyber and security and space security. Given the level of risk that's done, they've dropped no war states limited. Given the force level escalation valid drawing, that's true ensures winning a single war for conflict must be the first state must win the deterrence works for access to the applications of conflict not a level or basing to internal link evidence. First argument is that conflict not inevitable. A couple of framing issues. One, rejects link evidence. Two is intel shows stockpiling of food and fuel for wartime. Two is encirclement means policy has become zero sum, zapping diplomacy and communication lines. Three is decoupling ensures interdependency on check that's brands. Four, red tolerance is going 2024 Chinese and current record numbers times a race war treaty allies, which is bizarre. Five, primacy is accidental for both the drop and duties of strap award, which no they haven't, but it makes more structure guarantee by forces we can offer which is Watkins' first argument is the line evidence. This was mostly against above, but China declining increase the risk of aggression because they have nationalist leaders who do not care about internal economic problems. The populace going hungry, conventional superiority is wrong in answer to the Zhao episodes lose by bastards from the US and the Denver Coast Assets Institute, US and 1 year base with the French Taiwan, China 39 US now. The New York Times, Sky, China, Specific, British, Attack, Cruise vessels, and then 2 countries, Royal Carriers, US has. Commanders are willing to take carriers, and aircraft, Royal Baltic, China, 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 aircraft from operating the mainland, China, blockade of the island indefinitely. Next argument is I've inserted rehabbing this into the document that's legitimate because it is misrepresentation of evidence that concedes that wars and evidence that restraints will not be put in place until 2026. Next argument is more willing to intervene in conflict now with China because they think that they have military overmatch, but that is a misperceived reading of the situation. Second is that ambition causes nationalism inside the CCP that makes it more likely to lash out. No invasion was mostly above and will be answered on the counterpoint, specifically China, Japan, or India. Analytic is not true. The current evidence says that no war stays limited. Even if China only gets a limited skirmish with Japan or India, will never draw the United States because they have security interests in the region and want to be hedged by power. No James limitation. Their long evidence is about peacetime James limitation. Obviously, the United States would not gratuitously force China, but around it, it says that during the instance that the United States conventional diplomacy is greater China's nuclear forces, they might see them as a tempting target for James limitation. The United States never thought about nuclear wars about Russia. It says TNWs in Europe would never be used against Russia. However, we have a would be less likely to redemption to his doctrine, the NDT convinces us to turn to taxable use, freeze, audience, cause, force, speech, award. Generations exposes weakness of course, escalation, which is the Sweeney evidence, next argument is China would strike as well. They adhere to their NDT one his doctrine with statements and documents for retaliation to his investments, technical survivability, his prioritized, etc. First strike weapons that tell us the trees capabilities China doesn't have. TNW's most recent study shows zero evidence negative responses to fear mongering, which is the hidden evidence confidence and capability 23 China's most recent behavior, haircut, and tell them as far as Japan's easy, aggressive authority, as well as well, reduce reaction, provocation, security, killing, unsettled order, China leading Arsenal, Pakistan, G, Splendid, ladies, people, lands, media, Taiwan, SS, Manifacturing, SS, Ways, Cambodia, and agreements all announced, moving as well as the US, reach on the edge, working on 25 China. Leaders more complex and evolution, called like to do something US by topicality, and counter-prediction, asking about multi you got the rules, and you know, to come through with more governments, or knowledge, not just because I can find you got reachable flat. Flight transportation using territory armed forces of the other. Lackey says that we could be public, but does not say we have to be. We need the Lackey 24 evidence that could argument is inserted in the document. We get another interpretation if they agree definitive and evidence of an intent to exclude refer one's education to internal links as innovation used with the four aspects of scale-based current topics during research extended from prime to B as precision. Our evidence is the first. US-based discussion of NFU and its advantage to be precise. There's this advocate consider defining how they would do their own NFU to its functional over living things are readable. Advantages find engineers over large insurance gap between sitting got free resale limits because this country. Specific NEGs guarantees terms insurance modernization reasonability is all as good enough. Will defend announcement for your DAs, which is the cost of consult. The announcement arguments risk announcement can by permanent vote the shields by including the counterbalance process permanent accountable. It must be key to the taxing function. Both are key to clash and fairness by maximizing distinction. Should not serve accountable, but is for DAs key for one should be concept to educate no possible interpretation is mentally some discretion preferred. Certainty competition is bad by legitimizing link uniqueness and to claim is good makes AFF impossible. Permanent claim the counterbalance process on something else. The text is inserted the document politics. DA proves they would say no to whatever the risk analysis recommends. There's also a one-shot instead of the counterbalance doesn't spill over. No future S breaks. We get new answers when they read terminals for result. Then 17 hockey vote on every single conference in school board scenario, which are playing good opportunities and how this are likely that will major impact and have with that. Next 1,000 there will be no species regarding impacts of text 10 million because they don't let in. Advanced cities will decline. Not increase cities will be here. Will come nowhere near friendly baby population go to slow population will peak and then decline sometime thereafter. The advantage counterbalance perm do both perm do the counterbalance and cannot solve the first link of the hotlines one. China will say no. They already did issue a 23 China rejected something said revolution line like evolution. But hey, Christ line China's not agreed to its offense negotiated hotline links to the DA Wilson in 23 translations of magic leverage by issuing who like issues by relaxing sanctions out of their country state, now that it's territory, yes, Taiwan war. The second link is just a re-articulation of the status quo. It happens once elections are structural, even if the DPP is pro-status quo, the population isn't closing. China's window to its nationalism, it means China views Taiwan as existential for the overwhelms rational deterrence. 3 U.S. porcupine defensive strategy means aggression is better sooner than later, which is brand. It's coming in 2024. July. In 2024, GP for Tixi, the man levels when the outdoor good to believe they have a zero between also community reputation resources GC winners and voters DPP. This also GC motivation RGC and symmetry and institutions circling out forces are messages watches 2/3 back to the press like this China. It's very large advertising is concerning combat to the US actually as a golden G. Further, it's reiteration of the status quo, which was complained about the elections. DA Trump, the wins now. One is Betty Markets will Octas in 326 bullshit to be taken with great assault. They can be forecasted straight just by the way for business and five chance but it's not that it's still low for percent that is good to Trump for those. Over polls saying 24 rolling time to stats application market people listen to all factors and influence outcome those again I got 2 polls and money on the line 2 is polls confirmed 327. The president has a lot of voters in move show Trump lead the background state survey show Trump leading A. Biden was common around this time in 2020 but it's absent. Today the link is wrong. One swing voters are not real. Bills 3-5. I can give you some new waivers between Trump and Biden. I can see if swing voter this election differences or talks to voters this way the past 4 years or not. Any Boris North campaign goes what happens the next 18 months doesn't matter. They're not going to change our vote and they won't know about the AFF form 323 willing on the fence because they're not engaged with the debate. Very good small politics after preference voters out made their minds so interact how do you reach those voters that are not paying attention to news cannot be hit with ads if undecided after showing this month afterwards loving until they lost the veins days before the election ads at this point of seeing even seeing but not effective and they won't trust it happen. Brown and Klepper 37 deepfakes target voters in key swing states robocall them by telling them ineligible to vote even the money's not believe people discount legit sources of info even testable larger voters AI content about candidates making harder to use fact protection 2 is black swans voters will unpredictably latch on anything Claudio shows 3 22 many things can happen these things Biden's chances Biden's in more greater reception to respond friends and people in different sources grounds Biden days doing voting to any pick up my cyber swing voters decide to manage someone how to get registered by now level 3 it's too far out drum 3 4 silver and Georgia swing voters on condition and one after conventions will be here let's say like Biden has been a campaign and now he's on with this physical condition the econ might go south Trump will not cause a war first of all Biden cannot solve China which is the Watkins evidence there is a structural agreement between Republicans and Democrats that China is an enemy of the United States which means if we get into a conventional conflict he will still use nuclear weapons. Trump will be constrained related to factors cut 3 4 3 Congress and Congress and courts limit the Trump is limited by the lack of political listening to philosophers who consuls docs on the desk when you see the country by public countries dead is far-fetched progressive power will often took a whole life along. Trump learning to feel about navigating presidential with discipline always signs back over offense playing his sorts of business how he dominates news but if it doesn't change the policy learn not just been teasing on battles he found an assurance or permanent both to Trump playing solves the residual offense with education. Conditionality is a voting issue causes argumentative and tweaks these strategies skew time Cisco solves the aptitudes with Legos for assurance gating. Permanently both the shields by providing socio input, the more they explain how it solves our offense, the more links and benefit for remedial 22 US and the implication that we should be the most dominant role of nuclear weapons, something essential with the important use of the allies of confirmation resolved in the face of China, two good switching different vision discipline from allies and her. To the counterplan reduces nuclear strikes, the counterplan cannot solve our structurally unique arguments and causes immediate North Korean preemption nuclear war work into degree. And the CN integration and is cognizant of the need for line of so incident and good stable to the alliance while the ultimate purpose will be deterrence of prevent escalation risk by crisis escalation to the nuclear escalation venture to serve so go. And believe we cannot trust this act or make rest no matter how active the alliance consults with the NGC air. Any decision to use nukes will be made by America. The constant talk about compromise justification for their good to build more weapons close lines. And now instead of us to go first, president putting this basic security dilemma on Korea, no so-go proliferation of limiting factors, movies 21, no so nuclear down is not like so they're fully put down with this resistance to nuclear proliferation day. That's a restraint to verification of nuclear materials, nuclear safety during outside Europe, sanctions impacts on the economy and civilian atomic industry, and rupture alliance with the US and armed systems with peninsula like independent even if no impact on Cascade Kelley. And then 22 no police still launch out of the blue nuclear strike and the number charge Slavic TV. TCS will be consumers over the Cascade for China, Russia, and North Korea. All move first proliferation now, one assurance of low cost of meeting allies. Are decided out with credibility between two between so good, also Washington graduation down south by so good. And then choose good lady Washington will deliver assurance US cancel TLA and SLC and insurance reports from the US is on the default order. US is asking how much trust US going to use strategic weapons on behalf of US is vulnerable to the contribution and loss of value. This knowing defines allies trust US not the over remaining three Australian interests. Allies which is best rather to sustain two the first advantage, denying mutual vulnerability makes proliferation structurally adaptable China. Aggressive eventually like 18 close to the Australian vulnerability and less good litigation allies across Washington are disconnected even if things incredible but through the attachment should be forcing these people to stand on the credible allies. Believe Americans willing to fight these arguments and represent Washington refuse to that risk reviews because we refuse the pressure is not willing to otherwise alliances and bullets adversaries. 3 is Trump did it. And then 24 Trump and 7 12 so no lines let the law with the second Trump on the added going false developing also even if Trump is outweighed David already done US good return realization stance of the President Japan is watching with concern assurances always resilient for low threats relations with costs are high but 16 days 75 really improving will absolutely for good defense of defense county governments for allies and retaliating condition of organization of side obligations to non-military efforts lines with the U.S. was U.S. force effort to battle isolation, change potential injury, violently fund activities, troops, training this defense and diplomacy prevent from often. And all 19 members of allies can most very to reassure allies of nuclear message with their independence and eventually military exercises that the plan reassures allies, devalues nuclear weapons and improves intelligence or credibility so we can indulge in. 21 cents months days down for allies while reassurance which is not rationally capable of this ally though guarantees things after to make deterrence credible can increase more practice for states where we don't get to promote alliance partners.
So we can indulge this kind of provoked by alliance partners.
Sorry, what line is it?
So second highlighted paragraph, but just the last part of it is highlighted provoked by alliance partners.
Got it. You good?
Yeah.
Okay, so like right before Sukin Dalton, you're like the plan would result in the U.S. Reiterating our commitment to common defense, joint military exercises, and BMD. Why does that not then like proceed to link to your work card that is like increasing conventional shit on the Korean Peninsula causes North Korea to preempt?
Well, the plan's mandate obviously doesn't increase troops. Our argument is that the U.S. has the rhetorical power to say that for example, we still have troops stationed in South Korea and Japan. We still have ballistic missile density.
Well, so I just want to clarify. So like the deployment solve argument is not that the consequence of the plan.
The U.S. doesn't deploy those.
It's just we
there's other things that are necessary barriers to proliferation.
Okay, and we just like talk about them.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. Wanted to talk about the O'Neill card. I don't understand why this applies to the counterplan. This card seems to be explicitly about conversations regarding no first use that you just like conveniently shrunk every single time it shows up. Like, why does this apply?
Well, because you're going to say that the counterplan can resolve parts of our link turn offense by saying that it decreases the nuclear salience. This card says that if that's true, well, allies care about any shift in nuclear policy.
Why is that the case?
Well, because it reduces the contingencies in which the U.S. could use a nuke against like North Korea or China.
In coordination with. Okay, sure. The elections DA, you said can do both, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then where was it? The advantage counterplan. Why would China say no to a hotline if they do not want to risk a nuclear conflict with the United States?
Well, they don't want to go nuclear, but they definitely want a conventional conflict with the U.S. We read 3 cards in the 1AC that were 4 minutes.
Yeah, but why does a hotline? Why does a hotline about miscalculation preclude their ability to engage in a conventional war?
Well, they think so China thinks about these things differently from the United States, which is our mirror imaging argument. So the Kelley evidence kind of gets in line with this and says when they met earlier last year in 2023, China was we think that the communication line is a concession that the United States is exacting from us to give them conventional freedom of action in the Pacific.
Okay. Then wanted to go to case. Why what carriers does China why would China ever do that? Why would China ever conventionally strike US carriers if they know that it would incite a nuclear conflict?
Well, they don't know that it would incite a nuclear conflict. That wasn't a 1 in C argument. We have like 6 cards that are like, they don't believe that nuclear deterrence would ever implicate the US-China conventional relationship. But importantly, it's the immediate way to neutralize US conventional power in the Pacific to create an overwhelming advantage for China, because the US is completely reliant on its aircraft carriers to protect stationary bases in the region, as well as to just like fight an island hopping strategy.
Okay, last thing was, I got condo, anything else?
No.
Okay, we're running.
I don't think it's in here.
6:32. Cards. Oh god, that's so cold. Oh, thank you. All right. All right, moving from the road. Wonderful. Advantage counterclaim. Risk review counterclaim case.
Advantage, risk,
Is everyone ready? Okay, great.
Advantage counterpoint 2AC1 permutation to both links to net benefit doesn't add a few. That'll be the one in R. 2AC2 perm to the counterpoint and severance voting issue for negative ground. Let them spike out of any advocacy. New articulations of either permutation gets new 2 in our answers because the 2AC did not make a complete argument. 2AC3, China does not say 1 AC evidence says that they want stability because of fear of U.S. decline. The reason that they lash out according to 1 AC evidence is because of fear of U.S. military presence and over domination, which the counterpoint reverses by signaling United States commitment to stability. 2, communication solved. They allow the U.S. and China to clarify strategic intent, ensuring inevitable conventional attacks don't escalate. 3, it builds audience costs to stop U.S. first since we commit ourselves to diplomacy. Scene 4, it solves all stability shots. 23, reduce diplomacy can reduce risk of indirect escalation. West return talks reduce risk of nuclear crisis management, arms control actions. The possible influence away from the current arms structure, lack of political stand, and going to sustain structure by bilateral dialogue on the issue. U.S. could address how the hotline can be revived, expanded, and protected. Ukraine highlighted cooperating with China. They were starting about niche structure perception, which are future on specific issues. We're just likely to wandering into war. 4, I think, yeah. 4, China is picking up the phone. Kansas needs to cut updates. Lee and Judd. 4-2, Biden spoke on the phone with Xi. Mark's first conversations are historical. Summoned in November, in the latest ongoing efforts to review session. White House described the conversations with Canada, instructed China's foreign ministry said that 2 Canada in-depth exchange here characterized relations that beginning to stabilize with warning factors. Required attention from both sides. 5 is that they have conceded that the premise of that hotline solves stability. They allow the United States to clarify strategic intent to avoid escalating down the nuclear ladder, even if conventional wars are inevitable in the world. At the counterpoint, they never go nuclear because each state is able to calibrate their military measures to appease the public in the case of China without drawing in the entire firestorm of U.S. nuclear capabilities. This is 2AC4 was that it is offensive links to the DA. 1 is that it is empirically disproven. There is no evidence that indicates that China would do this in the context of a military hotline because they have a mutual interest in strategic stability, even if they did not, in cooperating on certain issues that require them to make concessions. 2 is that the stability dialogues still solve even if China extracts concessions from them because allow the United States to clarify strategic intent to China and allow them to calibrate their military measures to avoid escalation, even if they then use that to extract concessions from the United States. And 3 is that it does not link to the DA because if the United States just continues to say no to Chinese concessions, then it doesn't link. But if they say yes, then they still have not read comparative link evidence or explained why this triggers the DA, and the card does not get to that warrant. 2AC5 was the Taiwan stuff. I'm going to group all of it here because it largely will be answered on the it'll largely be answered by impact defense. The counterpoint does solve Taiwan. It reassures China that we're committed to peaceful unification, which leaves Taiwan's fate up to them. Our evidence says they care less about military posture than the signal that the United States supports independent Taiwan because our influence over them is too great. The reason that they perceive the need to reunify in the status quo is because of Taiwanese willingness to declare independence, which the counterpoint versus the signal. By recommitting to that, they sort of then extended the Taiwan impact here, so I'll extend our defense to it here. No Taiwan invasion, economic interest block it, and they know political attitudes won't change. That's on Sindo. China won't risk it. Cho 4-4 Taiwan. Here, stable price unlikely to occur. 63 outcome investigation. Cities what coverage we're seeking. Foreign investment concerned about combat readiness. Report widespread corruption suggests that is not the time machine for maintaining the status quo. Without crisis, there are too many mitigating factors. Al Hajra 325. Kinetic assault in Taiwan seems less than likely. China, Ukraine, larger long-term concerns would have to start from soon. Invasion carries a lot of downside, increasing realized manufacturing export field manufacturing China. And not ready to launch invasion. It would be colossal undertaking and a complication like a stout resistance would only mean more material over time, wargaming. In most areas, China would not prevail or a complex and wide effort. If we win military barriers to full Chinese invasion, it means nukes will not be necessary in order for China to execute their assault. And because they said China won't use first, the United States has an incentive to let China run itself into the ground by continuing to invade Taiwan, knowing that they will just lose the war. None of their nationalism or porcupine or elections arguments assume the mechanism of the counterplan that allays fears over United States support of Taiwanese independence, which is the foundation of the TRA and the reason that we are moving away from stability in the status quo, which our master evidence reverse causally says that we can overcome. The 2024 card was answered by the Alejandro card that I just read. The review counterplan? Which review counterplan? Not going forward, conceded permutation, it's a test of competition. Cross applications get new 2 in our answers because none of them are intuitive to me. And theories are reasons to reject the argument, not the team. Case. Extends 1NC1, war is not inevitable. A, no decline. Chinese slow growth was expected and still stronger than most countries, and no military shifts indicate Xi thinks his window is closing. 2AC asserts that there are military shifts and does not describe what they are. They would rather retain international prestige and build influence than go to war, which is proven by recent pivots to cooperate with Russia and Iran instead of military posture shifts. That's white. China's economy is fine, largely forced to recession. Underestimates resilient China overcame greater challenges like extended price rate, U.S. inflation, lower depreciation, currencies under reverse real per capita income rose 6%. Prices reflect global declines in international trading commodities, corporations ramped up borrowing, no recession.
says appears on the rising policy encouraged banks to lend investments not supported by data decline in private investment result from correction. China will contribute about a third of the world's growth. She is not feeling the heat. Cunningham 315 tumbling market. Under real Xi party sees things differently. Doesn't see crisis work report known as Chariafa Xi's leadership lead. China for economic challenges, unprecedented new era vision. Permeates every section. Parties happy with Xi's leadership. Party more control than ever. Nothing matters. More breakneck growth. Unsustainable party has long seen a need to restructure exactly what Xi is doing. America should bet on rapid collapse or sustained weakening in Beijing for China has proven naysayers wrong many times. Party appears genuinely confident it will do so again. B is no conventional war, corruption, and lack of coordination block concerted Chinese efforts, and they know it would jeopardize both rather than shave the regime. That's the Zhao evidence. The structural problem with this advantage is that KU's cards list military engagements that have been happening for the better part of a decade and then assert those things cause a shooting war between the US and China. They do not have an explanation for how this occurs other than things are unpredictable and cascade and other random buzzwords that do not amount to an incentive for either state to actually use a nuclear weapon in a war, particularly on the part of the United States. They cannot sink an aircraft carrier unless they use nukes first. Thompson 23 carriers incorporate tech innovation thinking through survival for decades. Believe despite Chinese efforts, carriers become more survival details. Each is signed with watertight compartments, redundant conduit ships, heavily armored and not signed with anything less than a TNW. Carriers rely on Virginia subs that outclass Chinese counterparts skill chain steps and now execute to engage heavily. The next step maneuver stops short of something attack to fight. China's advantages in any conflict. China will not be able to defeat carriers deployed to the region. They have conflated competition with conflict. The fact we have disagreements does not mean we're going to fight over them. Denmark 20. China challenge regional dominance pose a challenge for allies. Wearing E and SES likely theater competitions, not likely in the battlefield. Potential for war remains low. Smaller scale conflicts are more likely international norms, trade freedom of seas, gray zone tech, regional architecture, and culture. Foolhardy pretend competition does not exist. C is no SES war. They can manage tensions. Chinese diplomacy with ASEAN confirms they prioritize high-level communications and a desire for stability over power that's it is not misrepresented, and the re-highlighting is absolute garbage. Their sort of implication of this is that the communications dialogue channels that they established with ASEAN will be up and fully functional until 2026, but this still conveys Chinese intent to avoid escalation because they created those things in the first place. Filter this and other end announced the fact that the U.S. has no nukes in SES and China doesn't want to get nukes. They just probably wouldn't attack Philippines or Thailand anyway, and the United States has no incentive to suddenly get involved in a bunch of nuclear wars with random countries that it has no interest in defending. No SES war. Zhao 23. SES is not a flashpoint as less prosperous not engaged interest rate powers countries so if China and the Philippines reach an agreement to de-escalate tension between the U.S. and China. U.S. persistently opposes use force violence, unlikely to escalate urgent tasks as other issues. U.S. must work with the EU to stop Putin, Iran, and no conflicts rain urgent U.S. and China combinations public over the SES will be largely verbal. U.S. should maintain open crisis comms avoid isolation conflict. China's islands are more of a headache for Beijing than for Washington. D is Thucydides' trap. Wrong. China is not bellicose, and they're aware of the risk of moving too quickly. The concept is Eurocentric and misunderstands how China can't afford to challenge power everywhere all at once. That's risky. Evidence history proves numerous exceptions. Hana 20. China is rising to having confrontations that will not necessarily countries throughout history came without threatening U.S. Satisfied with the window with West Japan and Germany without solid service. China actually likes to ask with powers that aggressor and talking imperialism. China's desire for interdependence, protecting internal security and small SY has little appetite for investment to protect power. Global ambitions are moderate and can be easily accommodated. D is, I guess. E, because we got rid of the Taiwan thing, is no. China-Japan war stalls. 22 economic supply in Asia. China-Japan push integration either specified or choice to order. In Asia is contested but not exclusive. Sino-Japan relations are not defined by competition. Both part of emerging trade grouping and incipient cooperation, development, finance, uncertainty about the role of the U.S. created powerful and stabilize the relationship. No India-China war. Josh 22. India-China and the lack of great discretion operation targeting the hell areas of blockades. Not strong enough to attack Indian responses. Carefully calibrated team temperature. Now both sides have been pushed to escalate, but therefore both sides are sharply or under war would set them back decades. Extend 1 and C2. No nuclear use. A. Cost. We know humanitarian impacts and the scale of the operation are too large, even in wartime. That's Flocky. Sweeney is a hypothetical. Sweeney 21 is not entirely outside the realm of possibility the U.S. could contemplate nuclear use if, say, China was able to sink a single carrier killing 5,000 Americans and China did use eventually arm missiles against U.S. Bases in Japan. What reaction would that spark? Consider U.S. use under those circumstances? Only line in Brown about nukes is a rhetorical question. Brown 21. In conflict, would the U.S. decide counterforce is worth the risk? B is that we have never planned to do it. Even more. TNW reductions prove we want to be seen as capable of signaling resolve, but we do not want things to escalate. That's Roberts. C is empiric. 7 decades of conventional spats in the region have never spied world restraint is factored into planning for these things, and they have no reason why now is exceptional. That's the Krepinovich evidence. The bar for this scenario is extremely high. King 22. U.S. military improve China's dispersion and technically stabilizing its intention to improve China's survivability rather than use first giving consequences of nuclear war. You found certainly retaliation trying to generate a strong deterrent effect and impede U.S. damage limitations. The bar for how U.S. leaders need to be certain that China's match were using weapons. The risk damage limitation extremely low. Both sides would be act cautiously. Krepinovich 24. China and U.S. confront nuclear arsenals to retain strong region warning escalate. Washington machine recognized red lines. Previous forces the war fighting creating more U.S. forces. Had capability to conduct airstrikes to never request avoid wire warfare. Attacks marked by a ladder cover extremely maintained even amid wars that cost tens of thousands of lives. China and the U.S. and the side of caution considering military operation for avoiding escalation trade programs also states for conflict prolonged since both would have significant resources to draw on.
Yeah. We're gonna start right. Okay. 10 minutes.
I'm ready.
Okay, so one thing that is repeated on the counterpoint a couple of times is the counterpoint allows us to clarify our strategic intent to China. What does that mean?
It allows China to ask the United States what exactly it's trying to do when it like sails carriers to the South China Sea, for example, and whether we are intending on using a nuclear weapon and what exactly the signaling function of that to China is supposed to be.
Okay, so
because we're not trying to signal to China that we're about to first strike them, but we are trying to signal our military strength in the region, and we can clarify that intent to China.
Well, but to be clear, if we like win the case that they're fighting in a conflict, the counterclaim can't solve the AFF, right? Because then the clarity of our strategic intent then would be to use a nuclear weapon. Like how does the counterclaim solve that?
You think that if the United States and China went to a war, our immediate strategic thing would be like, China, by the way, we're also going to nuke you in like 6 months. Like, we would not want a war to go nuclear. No one has an incentive for that to happen. China knows the United States has an incentive to avoid that.
When everyone gets in a conventional conflict, they're like, oh yeah, this is fine. It's obviously not going to go nuclear. In the middle of a conflict, though, how does the crisis communication line or the hotline solve?
What is this notion that like conventional wars suddenly automatically involve nuclear weapons? Like, we've had a history of proxy wars and like with other nuclear nations.
This is irrelevant.
And we can still clarify our intentions over a hotline. Like U.S. and Soviet Union during the Cold War, like the foundation of the hotline is like, here is what we are doing.
Okay,
why aren't we going to nuke you? And it worked.
The question, I understand your argument about the beginning of the conflict, but in the middle
No, in the conflict.
What does clarifying our strategic intent do if the U.S. is like, all of our carriers are sunk, we have no bases in the region, what does the counterclaim do to clarify our intention then? Do we just surrender over the hotline?
I mean, we probably wouldn't use a nuke. Like, if we lost the war, we lost the war, and that sucks, but we don't want to kill our own population by nuking China.
The second plank of the counterclaim, does it fiat that the U.S. would not intervene in a Taiwan contingency?
No.
Okay, so how does it solve that? Is it just like the U.S.
It's like the reason that China needs to invade Taiwan now, at least according to the 1EC, and this was an explicit warrant in the 2AC, was that Taiwan is moving towards independence. This was your elections warrant in the 2AC. We read a 1NC card that says that it is not about military posturing, because that stuff is inevitable and well understood by China, but it is about the fact that the United States has been slowly moving towards the idea of an independent Taiwan. Biden even said that we would defend Taiwan using nukes no matter the circumstances. And so the need to clarify that we wouldn't defend them if they were to declare independence and China were to go to war against them sends in a very important signal that the United States has not been sending.
The U.S. can still intervene in that conflict?
Well, actually, the Taiwan Relations Act, according to our 1NC evidence and also like facts and logic, does preclude the United States from intervening. Like, we're not obligated to always defend Taiwan. It is not a traditional defense pact in that sense. And we've always said that explicitly. The third communique says that if Taiwan declares independence, we will not defend them because they are the aggressor in that situation, because we know how the dynamic between China and Taiwan operates.
Okay. Do you want the time 47?
gentlemen. Right.
But then that compromises the school.
No, it wasn't that.
This conversation's amazing. Okay.
We're missing BK.
Yeah.
No, I never finished that out. I'm just gonna write that. I never finished it.
Maybe just send out the ones.
Thank you, but no. These are controversial. I think they're pretty good.
Why are they controversial? They're great.
Everybody in Emory hates them.
Okay, well, everybody has sucks.
Well, okay, well, excuse me.
Wait, who did? Wait, who is after the mission? Gross. Does Michigan say anything fun?
Actually, sure.
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
What was the last thing after Revenge show from?
To include the career.
I'm not
level,
joking,
just
but
that.
that's part of my role.
Okay.
We all have things we're good at. Mine always having a
Is that
variety.
gonna be the one?
Why does the plan preclude?
Dip cap, man.
Dip, because it dip.
Oh, man.
Oh, wait, it's dip.
I hope it's dip cap. Oh, I'm looking. I'm almost there. Yeah, it's like a fiat in dip cap, is that?
Okay.
That starts negotiations when we start.
Okay. Elections, South Korea. Most shocking move. Candace, good. Yeah. Anna, cool.
One, concede no Trump wars defense, no offense, not going to go for it. Two, extend the Trump counter plan against, takes him off the ballot, tells the thumper on assurance. Three, and two, both obviously fails, because links to the assurance he is still. Now, conditionality, it's good. One is logic, counter bad, does not mean the plan is good. Their tradition arbitrarily insulates the affirmative refutation, also justifies the judge kick. Two is negative ideological flex, key to reverse testing, is false competitive equity, ideological education, side bias, bad topic proven, risk, and three, risk adversity, forces make up his arguments, give the negative fallback to encourage research. Four, no impact toward our classes, finish utility, confirms all check, let's see differences, this has a T-skew, are all four words, five counter, we get what we did, no more to the interpretation, the 2C, barely said anything, six, reasonability, conceded from T, non-rest, three, constant substance, credit, seven, disco fails, is condo disguise, arbitrary forces, process, and plain text confirms, and no contradictions, from multiple fallacies. Now, the South Korean DA. One, South Korean proliferation arose towards the peninsula, cascades to Japan, towards the war due to arms race speculation as moon. And two, it's quick and easy, 2023, so it goes to checking background racing further, working on private processing works. The method makes it too easy to work critical materials, average uranium separation transfer, as you can tell, also be helping cost for reduce or so it goes ready to a launch of 68 minutes, missile tech validation, a few months of a bomb, three, NFU, three, preemptive strikes, cost rollback, station, Jackson 22, and the period of greatest danger problems for the part of the operation, capability, trying to get preemptive strikes, leading behind a nuclear missiles, break the moratorium testing, and permanent nuclear assets, and the strategies to consider nuclear operations on China, the arcades, with the counter-targeting with adjustments of frequency. Now, tweets was permission to both. One, even if the common assurance at Korea, the inclusion of the average bridge too far, Bush 16, and of you, presents contradictions of the U.S. possesses a wide non-nuclear options and indication the U.S. waiver guarantees the risk of choosing no NFU should not adjust NFU. The U.S. favors that nuclear use should not remove the NFU too far. The U.S. should engage Korean consultations throughout the towards the cannot put the risk security values by atmosphere. Now, tweets 2 with the O'Neill card 1. We have and will only read links about the process of the plan, and an NFU. This is not this ridiculously low the link threshold the AFF is asserted to. It's only about the plan and links hardest to the plan requires clarification of different versions of NFU, inserting it caused by their justification of the 2AC. 3, drop the flip-flopping link. It's a cold conceded Washington Declaration calm pro-nuclear voices, but requires stable and consistent U.S. nuclear posture of the plan. The policy 180, that's a bolt from the blue, which gives nuclear advocates the upper hand, allowing them to convince Korea that nuclearization is the only way to ensure security. That's Pablo 4. And no first use link. South Korea sees it as accommodating China, makes it willing to stomach a conventional invasion, which they will not. Nuclear weapons are the end, the only option for Korean security. That's Harvey 5. They will not trust China, which outweighs on the factors. Central. Grandma 20. NFU should confidence in the arcade, no matter if U.S. returns comes over U.S. NFU. China pledge a contributor to from the region weaken the NBT, great difficulties, and allies, the nuclear metals, break away from Chinese declaration of view. It's going to hold the major prices now. 2C theories do the counterpoint that Aussie is separate to voting issue because this place that the ground is not adopted, and if you are trying to be so fucking for real, now 284 structural uniqueness. 1, it says the US will commit to the consultation. Plank 3, obviously ensures that it's durably beyond any situation of a crisis, and all the other arguments answer this too. It's status quo descriptive, and the case does not solve this. Again, they said we get into re-highlighting. 3, criticisms of the Washington Declaration are wrong. Support pro has been trending down. While accounting for the thumpers, blend 24, Washington Declaration. First time leaders adopted a separate doc, establishing the usual strength of the disease, Mr. Critics misplaced. European states are qualitatively very different, smaller, laid out separated by C. No agreements have been at the level national concern, the special alliance also abandonment, necessary to efforts to lay different numbers. Improves the Washington Declaration opinion favors over armaments, declining sport. Was at high 71 and 2021, decline 2022 was at 60 and 23, considered the US provocation more frequent, and license decline in the possessive new cards in the war. Ukraine did not save amount of public opinion. Now, 285 was no pro live 1. Card just list shit, we get new answers. Obviously, when they read new cards in the way. 2 is that sanctions are ineffective. Card 23, even sanctions may not be a determined to remove sanctions. Any conventions against analysis taking a social have to be balanced against the team links and many find to do it several times. So, go to judgment to the only economies US and Europe. Other countries certainly much rather have SOCO in their corner as they focus on Japan. 4, 3 is that South Korea will underestimate sanctions demonstrated by empirics. 4, robust civilian nuclear program, distinct resources, economy 20 shortage, energy resources made in SOCO from 20 years. Energy SOCO's on par with top manufacturers. SOCO committee examine possibilities army conflict decent doctrine that urge allies to their own defense, including experiments on rich widely considered SOCO as materials and tech resource building so great. Threat of nuclear alarm South Koreans and voices invoking Article 10. A strength that 2C6 was no impact. Yes, cascade Japan has the capabilities, but 2 is the impact overview above answers the impact defense. Now 2C7 was prolif. Now first warrant its assurances. Low argument 1 prefer issue specific uniqueness. Their cards must say the word South Korea in order for you to evaluate them. 2 is the Washington Declaration threaded the needle. Now, but the plan breaks. Units hold. Munition 23. Pro-new forces beating the drum of the nuclear union standards for American. Non-proliferation of the nuclear missions. Washington Declaration not very attractive exit. Institutional voice of U.S. nuclear positions. The hedging transfer to U.S. strategy. Women prevent proliferation. The deterrence is not the endgame. Success media pro-nuclear forces cautiously started hedging. Then in case the circle can develop nuclear short time period, use American equipment. Made it hard to put pro-nuclear GDs back in the bottle. Now, the SSC man warrant is obviously ridiculous. Read the news, and we'll read another card later if they actually make this an argument later. Now, 287, the component of the mutual vulnerability 1. It fails again to say the word Korea. Challenge 2. South Korea believes in nuclear compounds. I have 324 allies to circle assurances to the Washington Declaration. Where in front of U.S. policies, allies mentioned requiring independent nuke. A virgin firmly grounded jointly held perception to assurances. Best available so believe China no could be compelled belief in compounds reduce conflicts or bring conflicts which F5 to M3, acknowledging mutual vulnerability, inflames Koreans by perceptions. A She 22, U.S. vulnerability to China, a turn cost from South Korean perception, China to aggressive actions over a Yellow Sea and Aegis as well. Have concerns that China become provocative, worry about the impact on North Korea. So South Korea concerned watching way less committed to intervening contingent independence of China objects, bowing the Chinese face concerns about commitment, Koreans were under U.S. defense goal, even though demanded New York targeted the Chinese attack. 4, even if mutual vulnerability is reality, declaring this fatal for credibility. Cost 22. Allies react generally vulnerability, U.S. signaling vulnerability, coercion, U.S. forces aid allied groups in Poland, same Poland, U.S. with the current vulnerability, and if much is not available, reality might list the allies that perception of the U.S. acknowledgement vulnerability. Any a declaration that you would think such a competition comes as a surprise as whole. A new Chinese threat growing, outperceived declaration as a sign U.S. vulnerability to resist. Direction left for decoupling. C7 was Trump. 1, consultation solves it. That was 1 to see Mount. Draw 2. Counterman obviously solves it on the other page. 2C8 was the short is resilient. Answered by the link above. Other things solved. Again, answered by the link. Conventional capabilities required, but are entirely relevant by the class of nuclear deterrence explicit or more from our evidence above. Now 2C10 was the Sukin and Dalton card. 1, link out ways. It is obviously South Korea again. 2, their author concedes the counterman creates assurance. Sweet spot, but its success hinges on credible commitment. Gonna reinsert the part of it that was in the same parts of the 2AC card. Just gonna read the part after it. Threats such as combat background coercion will likely trigger U.S. nukes. If nuclear pending enable stronger grants deterrence by clarifying areas of which U.S. nukes will be used for problems will be avoided while strengthening credibility. I'm gonna read another NFU link that's in the doc. Biden retained first use for this exact reason. Page 23 NFU prompted Korea to lobby against change out of I was nervous that they not understand the security administration action of NFU is a word of mouth because allies from NFU from the news which indicates board communication Korea based opposed during NPR. Biden said the question allies asked about it. No, I read Thorn and
Jackson not work. I said the tag of work and realized it makes sense.
It's like I feel a little bit like, it's just like, oh, one cigarette won't hurt, you know?
This is also a recent development for him too.
Yeah, I just started doing, the worst I would do is like Coke. And now
Yeah,
it's
exactly. Okay, oh geez. Are you, I'm just kidding.
yeah, very.
He just started drinking Red Bull.
Well, I don't have a problem because I can stop whenever I want.
Exactly.
I just don't want to.
He says that about sports betting.
Hey. That's why I can never start a sports game. I'm just
It's
it's
not
gonna.
with fake money, so it's no risk.
Wait, so what's the fun in that?
Well, I mean, it kind of, well,
You should do it with real money, because then like when you win, you're gonna win a lot of money.
Yeah.
that's a lot.
And you never lose if you don't stop.
Sorry, that was.
90% of
It's a process.
Stop before the first day. One counterpoint set. Or advantage counterpoint set. Okay, Kentucky, good.
Mhm.
Channel.
Yeah. Sorry.
The Morbeck conceded multiple wars over your China conflict is another which makes the terms breaking in. And the proliferation of one, done. Storm on nuclear accidental nuclear escalation because they were started. And ASAC by trying to put the United States and the US response to nuclear weapons of the takeover crisis because they've not run a takeover defense yet. Yet I do not have to win decline, but they're stockpiling food now because they think that they're going to get into another bloody conventional war. They've also conceded that the US will lose the conventional crisis because because geographic advantages and China's technological capabilities that we would decide to go to war, which answers this out evidence. Yes, conventional conflicts. They have conceded things like they have economic interests in places like Japan and the Philippines. De-escalatory actions now does not assume the future action once the U.S. decides to occur. Evidence says that the bills upwards because those checks do not exist when don't exist during a time of crisis. Yes, competition is our argument. Trade, cyber technology are all collapsing now, which means that there's no check in between the U.S. and China because relations are happening. The relations are collapsing. The DUC Trump is wrong when they conceded internal nationalism. It means that we decide to escalate and our economies are declining. The formally evidence interest of no nuclear war evidence because the 1EC said that it would go nuclear, but it would kill at least 6,000 U.S. soldiers. They've also conceded things like domestic pressure inside of intramilitary and nationalistic pressure. And there are vessel clashes and resource disputes which are conceded carriers. Although it costs conflicts in China, U.S. other aircraft are Pacific, all at the same time, this is a year so that China forces China. The use of transportation carriers to one and for China to engage risk restriction to terms Russia and making comment. No, this government likely to country will like all the China increase percent crisis. It has an impact even if they win China missiles aren't good enough to say that the U.S. doesn't know it has the munition and conventional. So go nuclear or safari to Chinese missiles were filled up in China. If you missile first American history, U.S. and United States, you for China ability that use one country for this side. Who is supporting the most of the major advantage terms of conflict? It's a huge advantage for all the 23 China. They go to advantage for Russia, China. It's really for China, opportunity ACD, China, air conflict, resource protection. This was potentially be enforced by the position of the adversary. Yes, U.S. uses first one that conceded a tank when China has new SSPMs that breaks the U.S. out because they have similar acoustics and makes the audience think that China would try to first choose to concede an audience cost. The community cross already happened because China would have killed tons of U.S. generals. They conceded new tech like AI, cyber, and quantum. They can take one way likely, but we also don't have to win this because the way media evidence says that it proceeds to take away the argument highlighting say that hacker piece is likely the inside of the NPR are now the advantage conflict. China says no. None of their evidence says that China would say yes. What that says that China would say yes to the plan. The Kelley evidence says that they rejected military problems. Pick up the phone is not the same as a crisis hotline and it would fail. So we want to China especially to get president. Christmas out against Roman China. Not like the US covered military operation. Not calling China to peace and trust for our meeting. They think that China is going to be China believe that China is very contingent on it. Because for you to recall the Washington China destroys hotline wars and tyranny. US and Israel don't different countries. But all the people are switching across communication. And let's see, and after is perm do both solve when they get capture conflict on the other page. But the second link links to that benefit because it abandons Taiwan, which obviously is the bigger signal. The plan or similar, it does not solve the carrier's advantage because the US would strike first and has an incentive to, and it does not get rid of the US political incentive to not engage with China. The incentive crisis, they have not said that US says yes word, which might sound silly, but they do not have a card for that. Now, the code just said the overview is capped. US China were always clear. Curves say that our size and drawn ensure extinction, but durable PMs. Then he just said conflict is captured handful of nuclear weapons, no China use operation, no team W's. And survivability focus makes it impossible to use doctrine like a virtue test. And official statements of like a virtue dispute their argument. And China pursues non-proliferation operations. But the two said coming, hold on for them, China or one for that. Do not thought of China as a personal on this no nuclear to China doesn't country play. The same course between China and Israel. I don't know who that's because no nuclear way 131 of it. It's not going to work. It's not going to general that like what this connection first between the side of the sort of defense of it. Interest in leadership speed is wrong. I'm wearing 23 so it's not even ready for this like so this is really lots of other than we're doing today. That probably is about see. And so not what people in case over years is now the durable ensures that the US would decide would never use a nuclear weapon first and not do things like testing. Now there's no proliferation. South Korea is committed to non-nuclear weaponry. Now strict verification over nuclear material spheres, sanctions, claims to the US alliance, and the spirit of arms racing, which is the moon evidence, sanctions matters for middle powers, which gets rid of the first argument. The robust nuclear energy program gets taken away, which means that Seoul, which means that there's no impact. They conceded the Treacy card that says there's no impact. Seoul would be a responsible actor, so no one is scared of them. Then Democratic base here holds true in such a region, so other countries found still for more reasons. 920 to the right. Who does not cost to watch on the body load as a strong European trade party. This is like cooperation and nuclear water explaining something. But the American forces become target for attack. Economic sea shots overwhelmed in 23 so all the disclosure of work and a lot of movement station use. The training need of his export economy. Nuclear power suffer global nuclear for the benefits. But I'm pretty sure how much you said that CT stop on your raw material and carbon sugar over the natural withdrawal from NDT in the international community. The former more spring of could be system but neither. And not proliferation. Redeployment conceded the BMD part, which is the Republic, and this answers the future vulnerability. But the trade of first use for no proliferation doesn't solely hinge on the U.S. suffering a first strike attack because we could use our BMD missile defense programs that we have. We know what to allies and allies to use that makes sense to be trained also to play the loaded trade. And this also like most of the result of because of complex and adversary they handle the security. And the reverse going to help us from the running to the home stronger relationship. The U.S. takes a larger stake in security. Now, the uniqueness of it, proliferation is the number one crisis credibility and now for critical systems cancellation of broken promises. The Malawi commitment now ensures that SOCO proliferation and attainment demonstrates this inevitability which is cost weapons. Flip-flopping is the status quo because the U.S. and things like Trump, they continue the TC cards. That's inevitably the U.S. will decide to be isolationist, so barring Trump from running for office is not taken out because it's perceptive of the U.S.-China war, the inevitability of conventional conflict. We'll see what U.S. willingness to use and break resolve, which is the white evidence concession of probably the devil means that the Marines said that this side is Irvis about the Washington Declaration, which would be disproven below, but it doesn't answer structural neediness. And mutual vulnerability to that is not answered because we will inevitably have to declare mutual vulnerability. Perfectly both result. And reciprocal consultation says that the conflict is not resolved and limits strong damage when you watch it. The other features of one is just the overall limit of resolving this right. And the other result when you watch it, you'll simply be more focused on watching it was not. There's a portion of operation, it pushes off the inevitable unit 23% temporary result. There is also a strong nuclear power immediately. When you protect the ability to start your shares, it's strong information of the short. Nobody can suspect your members being wrong and wholly and nuclear so much respect. This is published here relying on a better listen to that.
Okay, 632.
You didn't read the punitive reactions part, right? Cool.
Wait,
You're good.
no, I did not. Cool. Yes.
Jordan's sending some cards, I think. But the order is the disad, the counterpoint, and then the case. Everyone's ready?
South Korean proliferation outweighs all of their preemption defenses about deterrence in the status quo and does not assume a new South Korean nuclear bomb that incentivizes North Korea and China to strike first to avoid new threats to their arsenal survivability. It means one bomb is sufficient to trigger our impact in their proliferation defense. That assumes that the impact is long-term, doesn't assume that they can get a singular bomb in months that is sufficient to trigger our impact. Conceded through evidence says that is issue-specific internal link evidence that says that only one bomb is sufficient. It means that their general time frame defense is not applied because South Korean nuclearization guarantees the rest of the North Korean arsenal, and they'll feel more fear that more bombs are coming, which is our Kelley evidence. Their China impact is long-term and refuted by decades of empirics, which flips the scales because it requires a conventional war to start, that conventional war to escalate, and both sides to be willing to use nukes. But you know that threats to our sole survivability incentivize nuclear use in Asia, and you know that our impact happens within a year, which means that any risk of defense of the case or counterpunch solvency should be sufficient to overwhelm the impact calculus at the top of the 1AR. There are no proliferation. Top of the sheet does not assume pyroprocessing. Dropped evidence that says that the IAEA inspections have confirmed that South Korea has the technology to proliferate domestically and would not need international support in order to do so. Conceded they can get a bomb in months, which would trigger preemption, and a singular bomb guarantees nuclear war with China and draws in the U.S. accessing the case impact on a far more certain scale than the AFF does. Their next argument, I'm going to read that in a second. Their next argument was no prolif proper. One is that sanctions fail. It's proved by North Korea and Iran being able to get the bomb despite overwhelming sanctions, crippling both of their economies. The United States also won, which is a dropped argument in our Pardo evidence, because the United States, China, and other countries can't afford the economic costs in the same way that South Korea can't. In the world of the disad, two is that they have domestic capability. Or ICAMO evidence says they're the most intelligent North Korea. They're the most intelligent nuclear capable country because of a strong civilian nuclear industry that is able to give them sufficient materials even with sanctions. The speed sanctions do not block their literal ability to do so, and the strength of the link overcomes the costs of doing so in the eyes of the South Korean public, because they've conceded if we win a link, it means the public would support proliferation because they think it's their only option, which is our argument about the Washington Declaration. 3 is that South Korea structurally underestimates sanctions. We're 23 gaps in SOPA's consideration response to the community, including revocation, redagging, potential proliferation, nuclear argument shown. Response to remaining impact states has argument seems to be fleeting. The chart characterization underestimates regional efforts, but there will be no sanctions. Lead 22 most common concern about nuclearization sphere sanctions from the UN Security Council. The MT guarantees the right to exit with Iran and SOCO. I believe based on the justification of nuclear no undermine security issues. Washington's likely to accept. It's likely to accept it. It's a general Beijing, even if sanctions are opposed. They wouldn't last long.
Also, economy says they have to take
An economy, yes. They say the BMD redeployment argument. One dropped. They've dropped the flip-flopping link in every speech so far. Their only answer is a bad uniqueness argument that I'll answer below, but they've conceded issue-specific uniqueness that says South Korean elites can resist public calls for proliferation in the status quo. The only certainty you have is that they won't proliferate inevitably in the status quo, but you know that the plan triggers that because it reneges on the U.S. commitment to nuclear consultation. It has a sudden posture shifts right after we have committed not to do such a thing, which is our piece of 1NC Pardo evidence. Conceded that none of their evidence passes the South Korea test of actually naming the fucking ally that is relevant for the disad, which means it should be struck from your flow, and the 2AR span will be too little too late. 2 is the NFU link. It is largely not answered. They've conceded that the plan undercuts subsequent reassurances because the signals that the United States is willing to accept an attack rather than deter one, which is the filter through BMD, because BMD is simply a defense against an attack, but it still accepts that an attack might be inevitable, which is the one thing that no first use can't do, which is our pain evidence. The prolif inevitable arguments. One is that the counterpoint overwhelmingly solves all of this. They do not really have a deficit to it. The note in the nuclear consultation group doubling down on it is all conceded by the 1NR. We read a bunch of re-highlightings of all of their evidence. It says that advocates for the counterpoint and says that it is sufficient to overcome South Korean fears because the United States recommits to nuclear consultation and institutionalizes it in a way that overcomes all of their deficits. Conceded that it solves Trump and Biden isolationism in the future by obligating consultation in the future, which solves their Trump argument and their flip-flopping arguments, which is their only answer to the link because they have not evidence to the effect that says that any of these things result in withdrawal from the nuclear consultation group, which the counterpoint says is sufficient. 3 is the mutual vulnerability link. It is largely not answered. It's our Sheen evidence. It's our Sheen evidence. It is filtered through all of the 1NR cards about the NCG. It says that mutual vulnerability causes North Korea to fear China. Conceded it spills over to fears of North Korea because China is North Korea's largest ally, and if we're reneging on one, we're reneging on both, which that vulnerability spills over guarantees nuclear calls for proliferation. They say permutation do both, and obviously links dropped our Bush evidence that says that inclusion of an NFU within the consultation process certainly results result in the collapse of the alliance because it shows that we're using the consultation process and then spearheading initiatives that South Korea doesn't like through it, which delegitimizes the entire counterplan and sabotages it permanently, which is dropped by the 1AR. The next arguments that they have tagged to say counterplan fails and pushes have not actually answered the counterplan. None of them assume the consultative mechanism of the counterplan or the links or the fact that we have prolif is not inevitable defense. The advantage counterplan. Counterpoint solves the entirety of the case. The filter through all of their say no arguments is that they have dropped in evidence. They've dropped evidence that is 4 days old that says that both the United States and China is interested in engagement in overcoming mutual threats of the status quo. All of their evidence about rejecting a hotline does not assume the fact that Xi and Biden have both said that they are committed to engagement and both want to further reduce the mutual threat. All of their arguments about why it wouldn't be used in a wartime assume that the counterpoint does not solve a conventional war, which it does because it allows the United States and China to do things like military exercises in a way that avoids the risk of confrontation, and it allows us to communicate in a crisis because our 1NC evidence says that it is sufficient to allay fears of nuclear entanglement and fears of using a nuclear weapon, which solves the reason why the United States would use first permutation to both links to the Korean Act, because all of our links are about NFU and mutual vulnerability. The counterpoint has not abandoned Taiwan. It doubles down on the Taiwan Relations Act, and they've not read any evidence to this effect, which means that the link has to outweigh just based on sheer amounts of cards. They say the U.S. strikes first. Drop that the counterpoint creates an audience cost. It makes the United States conciliatory towards China, which creates an audience cost for Biden, who no longer is able to stomach using first. The case. This plus the counterplan is largely case defense, but I'm going to extend a couple of arguments about why the United States would never use first. We know the humanitarian crisis would be catastrophic in a world where the United States used first. We do not have an incentive to do so. They've conceded China cannot sink an aircraft carrier without using first, and we've conceded China's not going to use a nuclear weapon first, which means that all of their aircraft carrier stuff is irrelevant because that is the missile that their evidence is talking about, and all of our evidence assumes entanglement. We read a card from Reking that says that entanglement is a very high threshold because we would just avoid targeting those assets and instead fight with like Navy, with like ships and submarines and stuff that are all conventional and do not go nuclear.
I'll give my Twitter is not
Yeah, no, you're busy.
Someone go tell them to pull up the live stream.
But I need you to rap. No, we're just really praying the live stream's got the audio for us. It's all you know it is. Someone's gotta go bring DJ's laptop.
Hey Jacob, should go wander around out there and see if you can find. Yeah.
Are y'all recording this?
What's up?
Are y'all recording this?
Yeah.
Can I get a copy of it?
What was that?
And Arnold said he's also working on it. Yeah, that's exactly.
What? Did you check the toaster?
Yeah, I checked that.
Okay. I was-
This is the worst. I
I
feel
was
like
gonna say, we're kinda icing them.
yeah, I always get better speeches right away.
Now you get to think like, did I extend ace? Like, are there any voting issues you're missing? Like any theory arguments I might have said?
You just like read ace like in one scene. I was like, what? Why? Like the crows one? What was the point?
Well, because they didn't specify their agent.
Okay, well, I thank you for that.
Because we wanted to go for an agent counterplan, but they foreclosed our, they blocked us from being able to do that. And we thought that that was unfair, and then the judges just hold the line.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
It was really because they said no, and then it was just NFU, and so we were going to them.
And because
The other two AC almost counterclaimed so.
do the The carded ATEC is too OP.
Dude, even if someone forgot to hire to find the I still don't think they could look That makes no sense. No way.
What do you mean? Like we read like so many, like the United States requires specification. Because it says the United States.
You specify the United States.
No, you gotta specify which states. You know, like is Alabama, like New Mexico.
How would New Mexico?
Los Alamos, bro. Anyone seen any like good movies recently?
I kinda think we should. He did take his phone with him, so.
He did or did not?
He did.
Okay, I'll do it.
Could like send a card doc to confuse him.
It's now a 4-judge panel. If it's split, who doesn't know?
Be like BK tech time ended.
I texted him. We'll
This
see.
is ultimate.
I'm not,
This is the ultimate
I'm not
judge.
super up.
It's a 2-2.
I will say that.
David goes with John, I go with you, and
Whoa, why that?
Solidarity.
oh, yeah. Solidarity.
It wasn't us.
If it went the opposite way, we were gonna
Was he texting you?
No, I'm saying I.
It's like
So
funny.
funny.
There's something funny about that.
I get like trying to close in on the decision time now. Like, we only got an hour 40 left. Like,
Someone told we had Harris on our panel in doubles, and someone told him he had an hour and 40 minutes, and he got real excited. So he walked out of the room and disappeared.
Yeah.
his theory was that like implementing a decision time is going to drastically increase the amount of time it takes to decide. Because you just see like if you have like an hour 40 left, and you're just like, all right,
I
might as well use
think
it.
that's possible, but just like something had to be done, like
Yeah.
Harris had to be stopped.
That could be another way to fix that.
He did talk about how it felt hostile that the rule was created at the committee meeting.
Yeah.
It feels hostile waiting 3 hours for a decision too.
This was targeted, absolutely.
It was even better because like he kept icing every speech because he was talking to someone in the audience.
Yeah.
So like I was standing up for my KR and I was just twiddling my
Dr.
thumbs
Harris.
waiting for Dr. Harris to.
Dr. Harris, I'm ready.
Did you get confirmation of live or?
No, no. Oh, oh yeah, he's on.
Should we clap for him?
Wait.
No,
No.
He survived.
Say like the last line.
He's a
You
survivor.
didn't follow it?
Survival of debaters room.
We don't know. There's hours to go. So.
It might be a funny idea. When he walks in here, I'll say the last line of the Twitter and he'll start laughing.
Good debate. Card got sent. He's alive.
Case, counterclaim, yeah. Alright, everybody good? Okay.
The case is huge. It makes it full of DNA inevitable when they drop two spirits for U.S. China war being inevitable. One, our John Evans says that even during peacetime, China will cyber attack dual use satellite systems probe or nuclear reports to be a cyber attacks a signal. Nuclear escalation against the U.S. to try to destroy conventional attacks. The Pacific Beijing doesn't believe in nuclear war fighting, but that is a mismatch perception with the U.S. that guarantees nuclear escalation, even if we think the humanitarian costs too high because it is an existential issue. From the U.S., the scale of our dropping impacts is enough to outweigh thermal solvency. China's hacking our dual use satellites is an existential issue for the U.S. U.S. planners will think the arsenal is being neutralized in the event of attack, which means they won't wait to pick up the phone or ask China, given it is life or death for the security of the U.S. coming in. If Rachel says these can take this vulnerability use force against nuclear escalation, given the fear that China can instantly prosecute victory through nuclear signaling, punish concessions because they didn't go to the key stage, make the DA structurally inevitable if the US and China are fighting with one another and the United States will launch nuclear weapons. Second scenario is carriers. The overwhelming consensus of evidence from space is that China is destined to sink an aircraft carrier. Generic defense is not enough to apply to this scenario when faced with diplomacy or war being bad for the economy. The attractive target of US carriers is enough to attempt a conventional missile strike at the heart of US power in the Pacific. Even if you're talking about they conceded that there is nationalistic incentive for US and China to go forward, circumvents all the kind of ones needed not talking to one another because crisis communications are not attractive for rivals, such as the crude evidence war expands immediately and horizontally. Case defense is not enough versus if there are humanitarian costs to US virtues. One, they must answer the question of losing, meaning that carrier attacks would escalate, the United States would lose the conventional war, or evidence for mass weapons from the species that the United States would overwhelmingly lose in the instance of a conflict between the United States and China, which means that even they do not care about the humanitarian cost because it creates a dilemma for the United States. Secondly, the second argument is that the country with real evidence has entanglement forces the United States to escalate. They do not worry about humanitarian costs in the instance where they think their entire arsenal is being neutralized. Yes, China will sink carriers or layers in like evidence says the US is ramping up carrier deployment to the Pacific now. It's circumventing, creates a uniqueness issue for the Canada because the United States is increasingly provoking a hostile plot against China, or like evidence says China is destined to sink an aircraft carrier. I would concede that China will not use a nuclear weapon against the United States. It takes out all of their preemption arguments for North Korea because they believe in their NFU. However, it doesn't take out the carrier scenario because the United States does not know whether the munition that is fired at an aircraft carrier is nuclear or conventional. It means that there's an instant incentive for the United States to use a limited nuclear strike in the Pacific. The last argument that Twin is the Rick-Wheeling evidence, no entanglement. A, didn't read this brownie phase 2 or done it poorly. Evidence says it. They wouldn't know the time the missile was coming towards the carrier, which means it would be forced to escalate now. The counterpoint is solved 0% of the case where going forward because it doesn't resolve US insecurities. At no point is the negative. The counterpoint removes carriers or stops the propensity of conventional conflicts, so you should not apply for them. Aren't links to nuclear escalation or about US entanglement fears and audience cost because the generals would die and because we'll lose thousands of troops, which you know about talking to resolve. China can't also doesn't say yes. The counterpoint they are barreling towards war with the US now. Blinken offered one recently and they said no with distrust. Our people says it. They think it is cover for US military operations and is too slow in a time of crisis, and the real crisis would be torn up like a piece of paper and hauled out because security matters more than talk and sense of the context and nature of our deficit. Probably means that this is often because war says the PRC thinks hostilities are excuses for war, conventional provocations, and feel the counterpoint committed to engagement. His reactions at best not about a crisis hotline. True in our limelight is not enough to overcome the propensity of our internal links. First, the 4 days old evidence is just picking up the phone that is not the same as committing to crisis communication. They must answer the question of the scenario for the counter by which the United States is already losing in a conventional conflict. We have lost 4 or 5 carriers, thousands of soldiers have died, and generals have been struck on aircraft carriers. Why would talking to China remove the incentive for US forces because they would prosecute an immediate nuclear strike if they know they're losing the brains? Exactly, the evidence is dropped at the end of this day. There was nationalist incentives for both sides to go to war. Beijing is preparing for war in the status quo, which means all of their evidence is short-term about counter solvency, but the risk of case is structural in the long term because the United States and China are rivals in the international sphere. Now, the North Korea day, there's no impact in the SOCO DA. The 2R is very good buzzwords about deterrence failure, but not about the incentives to escalate. One, SOCO, GSC Union said South Korea is a responsible nuclear power. No one would fear them. They are democratic and they're irrational. Because China don't have the capability to strike first, abide by the doctrine and any contingency. And out of fear that China would pursue non-proliferation to bring them to the table, which is the 1 year spent evidence. Please, no go, they don't have conventional forces and their nuclear capabilities will get struck by ADM, which is Roy terminal. Impact even speeds the draw in and warhead number of our scenario. Should not wait, which is the clear evidence. There's no preemption. Roy evidence says that North Korea does not want war. They recently pursued diplomacy with South Korea and do not want to prosecute a conventional attack against the Pacific, which means that there is no incentive for them to gratuitously strike South Korea, whether it is with a nuclear weapon or anything else. Our Smith evidence says that China will pursue non-proliferation as well as the concession on the case page. Take this out. Internally pontificating at the top of the case page equally applies to the DA because there are way too many steps to get to an impact to proliferation, whereas you know that China war is coming in the status quo makes the DA inevitable. China's scenario is not long-term. Our scenario says that they are destined to sink an aircraft carrier very soon because of the inevitable. Our evidence also is dropping the 2 hours necessitating South Korea to proliferate, which means you cannot create a time frame distinction between the case and the disadvantage. It says that there will be sanctions, international repercussions, even if they're not as successful at preventing non-proliferation. The impact scenario for the DA takes an incredibly long time because other countries would want to preempt South Korea and know that they would have no threatening nuclear capability in the interim. First, arguments in the 2 are 1. IEA means that they have the capabilities to prosecute a nuclear attack. That is not true. Our evidence says that in the instance of South Korea trying to proliferate, all of their physical material will be taken away from them. Civilians will not cooperate with the people who want to proliferate. And generally, the international regime, which would incredibly increase in inspections as well as control of South Korean nuclear material, it cannot turn the case. It doesn't cause China war because of the concession on the case base. They would not use a nuclear weapon. They must win that South Korea uses those nuclear weapons in order for the DA to have a nuclear scenario. But our moon evidence says that South Korea is a rational nuclear power committed to the democratic peace theory, so they would not use a nuclear weapon, which means they can win 100% risk of the DA. The case would still outweigh domestic capabilities in the civilian industry. Our reasons why they would not want to pursue nuclear weapons because they are committed to a strong civilian industry rather than diverting that plutonium for use in a nuclear weapon. They would also lose in no instance of proliferation, which was done above. The link cannot overcome the link. Even people support proliferation after the plan. But once they get hit with sanctions, people would not be able to afford food. The United States would go full court press in South Korea to prevent them from proliferating, which means that there is no chance that the public would stay committed to proliferation, even if there is a short-term security flip. Now, the last argument I would extend is that BMD solves the link and meets the 2 silly test of does this say South Korea. It says that the United States is that in the region which they can successfully reassure
South Korea that can shoot down any preemptive attack means that without delivery, and even if they think that an attack is inevitable, it solves all the link arguments because it removes the impact of any attack on South Korea. First, it answers the flood-throbbing link, even if the United States is committed to reassuring South Korea now. The nuclear capabilities of BMD means that it would prevent any scenario in which they think that they would need nuclear first use. It also answers the NFU link because there is no impact to South Korea being attacked, and or where we have BMD in the region. And it lastly answers the mutual vulnerability link because even if the United States admits it is vulnerable to China, we have homeland defense and we will just strike out any missile coming our way or South Korea, which means we do not admit mutual vulnerability, but rather commit to defense against China's aggression. All of the Trinos arguments on the link case are solved by that BMD argument.
Yeah, I sent a card doc.
to all of y'all making it to the octafinals. The decision is a 3-2 for the affirmative from Kansas. I am one of the people who's sad. Before I get into, I mean, first of all, you don't want like the long one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Before I dive into it, I want to say this was by both sides. I thought really a masterclass. This was awesome. Planning to get recording this and have our debaters watch it, just like phenomenal. And I've made no secret of the fact that I've really loved judging y'all this year, and that you've been really but this was a really close debate. I am happy to elaborate more on the subcomponent of this, or like answer follow-up questions about how this differs from other judges, our views, or whatever. The top line version is I do think the affirmative wins that South Korea won't use a nuke, like TPT stuff, etc. But the impact they're going for is the preemption stuff. I think you then are like, China won't use a nuke because they have an NFU, sure, agreed. But their evidence, like the 2 hours lighter on kind of unpacking some of the incentives the chapter faces and stuff here that I would have liked. Well, they spent a lot of time on the impact, but not as much unpacking why it is that China would be willing to conduct a conventional strike. But I do think that the kind of set arguments are there, and their evidence does substantiate that China conducting a conventional strike escalates. The piece of that the primary piece that I would have liked a little bit more on is an explicit indication of the fact that like the U.S. being based there means that we get drawn in and like unpacking how it escalates, how it spirals from there. But on the flip side, you all are never saying there's never a point at which y'all contest that is the case. And I do think from the outset that is kind of my understanding of the scenario. That's the Johnson card they read in the 1R, as well as the Symbala evidence they read in the 1C. Symbala also substantiates there's some chance North Korea might preempt via nuclear strikes. I did not think that piece was like as much, but I do think the like China conventional strike thing resulting in conflict, very clear scenario for a conflict to occur. And the reason that's especially important, I think, is kind of brought into focus by comparison to some of the stuff they'll say on the case. So yes, impact if they get a bomb and stuff. I will say, when the debate first ended, I had thought that my decision was going to be South Korea won't start a war, they also won't get preempted, etc. But like, I don't think you'll ever read a card that says that. The only thing that you read that even kind of does is the card that you're like, China won't do that, they'll do non-proliferation things instead, which is just like, says that if South Korea has a nuke, China and Russia would care more about non-proliferation. But I don't really know why that responds to any of the set of incentives to preempt and pressures and stuff that they're talking about. I think if unpacked more in the 2AR, I could get there, especially given the lack of kind of the 2AR unpacking that connection, but I don't think that happens. At that point, the rest of the DA stuff, some uniqueness concerns, definitely not decisive, definitely don't think Pro is inevitable, definitely don't think it'll for sure ever happen. Link fairly big, flip-flop, blah, blah. Debating the VMP stuff was smart in the 2AR, but I think one part from like 2017, even if kind of well explained, doesn't really get it done in the face of their evidence and debating of said evidence. They are able to proliferate, moderately likely to do so, no cascades, but that doesn't matter for the impact stuff I talked about a second ago. The case/the counterpoint stuff. I do think there's a decent chance they'll pick up the phone. More importantly, I think that things are kind of stabilizing now. I think the counterpoint further magnifies the ways in which that's true, / the extent to which it's true. I do definitely think there might be crises. I also think they might become wars. I think they might not. I think if they do become wars, they might escalate, they might not. I definitely don't think any of it's inevitable. And I think that it's unclear that the US doing an NFU solves a meaningful impact here. Like, we're not gonna use first, they're not gonna use first. You go for the carrier thing. I thought a lot of this was smart, but as I understand it, I think your 2AR pivot in response to the China won't use for, like, in response to them conceding China NFU, durable, real, means they won't nuke the carrier. It's like they read a card that absent using a nuke, they can't take out a carrier. you all are like, in the 2AR, your only real answer to this is like, sure, but absent a US NFU, we will freak out about those incoming ambiguous warheads against a carrier. It is unclear to me why that's true. It's unclear to me why a US NFU solves it except for writing out the detonation. Insofar as the writing out the detonation thing needs to happen, if they can't kill a carrier, then the detonation, I don't know, it was very difficult for me to, another important, sorry, I know this part's a little jumbled. One other important thing here that I felt like was kind of the missing component of this is like, to the extent that you are unpacking arguments about why the US is particularly likely to respond forcefully in a way that escalates, whether via launching a nuke or not. It is all packaged, as I understand it, in terms of one of two things. One, what about when they have sunk a carrier and that sucks, or we've lost 4 or 5 carriers, or we've lost thousands of people and we've lost generals? Like, that doesn't happen. Because you were like, incoming ambiguous warhead thing, and they've said, if it's not a nuke, you can't kill carrier. The other is like use or lose type pressure stuff, which is not connected to by an ambiguous warhead incoming at a carrier, right? Some of your like cyber attack on asset stuff, I think is higher risk, but I think there they get more traction from some of this like are there incentives for that kind of conflict to begin with? Which again, I think there's some chance it will. I am not confident that a US NFU solves it or is necessary to solve it or whatever, and I do think, again, with the like preemptive strikes defense, especially like an on-point card on preemptive strikes, or even absent that, probably here, debating out why that set of incentives doesn't make sense, or pointing out that there's like not an unpacking of why, like even if China does conventionally strike them, what next? It's fine, doesn't go anywhere, they didn't explain why it does. Like any of that kind of stuff, I think I am at here. But absent that, it was very narrowly in. Does that make sense?
I'm the other one voting neg. The more I think about this, like the more I just ended up just like very, very neg on the dissad. I think it's relatively big. I think like the case is also relatively big, but I concluded that like EA is probably faster. It starts like a clear crisis in Asia that I think is just like the most obvious scenario for a war starting. Even if I think that the app has some reasons that there might just be like a US-China war in the long run. I concluded that just for almost everything that the 2AR goes for on the dissad, I think that the neg just has like a pretty clear thing that answers it. So like sanctions, like 1AR and the 2AR just like dropped that the US and China would not sanction South Korea, which lowers the risk of this argument a lot and cuts out a bunch of the 2AR that is just like, it would hurt their economy so much, it would hurt their nuclear industry. Like so much of the 2AR is just that sanctions are bad, but I think that there's a carded argument that says that allies wouldn't sanction South Korea. Fissile material, like the 2AR doesn't really have an answer to this just like pyro processing thing that is like they have a way that you can get the fuel. Which means that I think they could just like get nuclear weapons relatively quickly, relatively clandestinely, which gets to a lot of the negative impacts. I don't think you're winning much preemption defense. These cards just like don't really say anything at all. I think that the neg evidence is just like a lot more explicit that just both countries would preempt. And just like a structural argument that just like new arsenals are less secure. So I think it probably goes nuclear. BMD mitigation gets you somewhere, but it's like, there's just a lot of link arguments that I don't think are directly responded to. And I think that, I sort of echo BK there, that just like this card is not explicit about South Korea. All that said, the thing that I spent by far the most time thinking about is just like, I think that, you know, if it's true that like a US-China war is inevitable in the long run, that like proliferation is probably inevitable. And that's the thing that gives me the most pause. I ultimately didn't end up voting on that just because I think that the dissad is so big and the most explicit scenario. And the 2AR doesn't have a lot of defense, but at least has just like a claim that is just like, you know, I'm not totally certain which just like crisis between the US and China escalates, which I think is like, you know, that turn argument is depending on when that there is just like a crisis that escalates and has the US lose. The 2AR has some like carded carrier defense that I think is like pretty important. It means that I'm not like at least absolutely certain that just like the US is going to get totally crushed in a conventional war. And the last thing is just that this, I don't really know how to resolve this, but there is a counterplan in the debate that resolves just like Taiwan escalation. It does a bunch of stuff. It's, the 2AR I think mentions it, but doesn't explain it a lot, but it's just like, there's a counterplan that's there that I think that just probably solves the most likely scenario for US-China war. I think all of that means that I'm just relatively confident in voting on neg offense. I think if there's an answer, just like if some of the doors are closed on this Berthiaume stuff, or there's just like a carded scenario that says that just like, you know, like if there is a conventional war with China, then like South Korea immediately has nuclear weapons, then definitely AFF. But absent that, I think the NEG just has, the DA is big enough that I'm pretty confident voting on it. And yeah, in Kentucky, like, you're my favorite game to judge. I've judged you so many times, and like, absolute favorite, so, yeah.
So I agree with a lot of things that Gabe said. I think where I differ is I thought that the risk of the advantage, the risk of a U.S.-China conflict, conventional conflict happening in the status quo and escalating is larger. And I definitely thought the risk of the solvency deficit to Hotline's counterplan was larger than BK thought it was. And I thought that, and I did vote on a conventional, conventional conflict between the United States and China that the United States loses is going to be pretty bad for the security environments that South Korea is navigating, and probably would incentivize them to get a nuclear weapon inevitably. I think in terms of the sort of mechanics of how this stuff goes here, I thought that I think that I was comfortable voting on just like small conventional skirmishes between the United States and China are inevitably going to escalate, even kind of absent the question of whether we can like full scale take out a carrier with a conventional weapon. I think that there would be a war, whether that's a war over the South China Sea or the East China Sea, whether it involves Taiwan, right? Like some of these hotspots are going to escalate in the status quo, and there's going to be a conventional war. And then I thought that just like the arguments that Kansas was continually making through the debate that just if a conventional war were to happen, the United States loses because we're like conventionally inferior now to China, and the scenario for nuclear use is because we're in this conventional war that we're losing, and we sort of like get desperate and have to use a nuke there. I thought that that was a fairly compelling escalation scenario, and I thought that just the argument that that would not be particularly good for South Korea's security environment, might incentivize them to get their own nuclear weapon, I thought was just sort of fairly intuitive to me. Hotline's counterplan, I was sort of convinced by this argument that the utility of crisis communication decreases fairly substantially in the middle of a crisis. And so once we're in a situation where we're in a shooting war with, we're shooting missiles at China, they're shooting missiles at us, the capacity to kind of pick up the phone and de-escalate things drops fairly significantly in that contingency. And then I think that the fact that they've got this sort of like theoretical, so this like Branson Beckley card that China's super nationalist and they're expansionist, and like that's the kind of root cause of some of these territorial skirmishes that I think make conflict inevitable. I thought that that provided a sort of theoretical reason why China might not pick up the phone and why hotlines might not decrease communication. The DISAD, I would kind of ratify Gabe's read where it's like the mechanics of this DA are pretty big. I thought that there was just some pieces of mitigation that brought it a little bit down below the advantage. So I think that a combination of THAAD, BMD reassurance, as well as just a little bit of this like Einhorn, it's really hard to get fissile material. It might take a long time for them to do nuclear tests, which I thought cut back against some of the time framing that the 2NR ends up going for at the top level, as well as a little bit of the sort of impact defense, the arguments that, China would never use a nuclear weapon first in the crisis because they're going to use really durable, combined with North Korea, might be a little bit skittish about starting a war, some impact defense to whether North Korea would preempt, and I thought that the combination of those things made the AFF bigger than the DA in this debate, but you all are awesome. David, I've judged you a ton of times. Like, I love your two-in style. It's tremendous to watch. Jordan, you're a local Georgia kid. I have so much love for that, so much love for what you've done in your career. And so you all should hold your heads up high for your performance, not just this weekend, but throughout your, all the years of your big career.
I think I agree largely with Mr. Stupek's decision. I'm probably a little bit higher on the risk of the cyber C3 scenario than BK had discussed it. I don't think the question of whether an FE solves it is ever raised by the NEG. I might be farther AFF on the question of Hotline's counterplan part solvency than Stupek was. For me, I seriously considered or maybe anticipated ending up in a spot similar to ADA based on, you know, the whole chain of events that BK explained on the impact level of the dissad, resulting in like a try or die neg arc, like I gave it ADA. And then was genuinely surprised by, Stupek mentioned the Einhorn evidence, but the like, they can't get, the materials would be taken away is the way the AFF frames it. The whole debate, I basically just mentally blew this off because I didn't think it made very much sense, and agree with Morbeck that the pyro processing buzzword, you know, intuitively seemed responsive. And then when I read the evidence, there's two carts that are relevant. One is like, they can only do this at lab scale, and it's like absolutely talking about the same power processing thing. And then they're dependent on the nuclear suppliers group kind of discussion. And when I looked back and tried to connect the dots to my flow, because I figured I would explain why, you know, the AFF needed to do a better job on this story or something, like, I was like, oh shit, like they are flagging this. They're clearly distinguishing it from the sanctions warrants that I think the NEG is doing a very good job answering. And so that ended up factoring into my assessment of the probability of the dissad quite a bit, and definitely reduced it to a level I think below the advantage, which is an invisible threshold. But obviously I think the implications of those arguments, as Stupek explained, function to like make the next time frame argument a lot less relevant in comparison to like a relative contestation question for both the NC3 scenario on the advantage and, you know, that kind of warrant for no prolif. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think I ended up in the closest spot to Kevin. I thought that China does not say yes to the hotline, or if they do, they don't pick it up in a time of crisis. So there's not really a chance for us to do the intent clarifying things that we've intended to. Your evidence says that they're answering the phone now. Is definitely the newest in the debate, but it's not in the middle of a crisis, and I think there's clearly distinguishes. It also says that China, while they're willing to discuss things in general, they are certainly not interested in a more formalized or robust system for that discussion. And so the sort of attempt to make that happen on a like formalized, you know, it's going to happen in the time of crisis scale, I think probably doesn't happen. So I basically judge kicked the first plank of the counterplan. I don't think it solves the AFF. It doesn't link to the net benefit. I think that I determined that a carrier's attack was relatively likely, and that the U.S. doesn't necessarily know if it's nuclear or not. I'm not sure whether the carrier actually sinks is necessary for to win their impact. I think their evidence says that the sort of loss of life and also the loss of the perception in the area, that just like the visible, you know, like photos of seeing the carrier having been bombed, would be sufficient to precipitate an attack. And so I think that your evidence is quite good that literally the carrier would not sink. There's like, I don't know, something about the, I don't know, I know these things from like the Titanic. They have like little hole, you know, and it's not supposed to sink. That makes sense to me. It does say it would have to be a TNW to actually sink it, but I'm not sure that you have to sink it in order to win, that the United States responds to it. Your Denmark evidence agrees that small-scale military conflicts are likely, even if a nuclear conflict is not likely right now, but I think their evidence says pretty clearly that those are likely to escalate, especially once they determine that China probably doesn't pick up the phone in a time of crisis. I agree with Kevin that there's not a lot going on the cyber dual use section of the debate. I would have loved a card or two there to sort of substantiate what I think is your sort of overwhelming position about whether, you know, there's going to be a conflict. I do think both AFF and NEG evidence says that those sorts of levels of conflict are likely to happen, and so it's a question of whether those escalate, and I think the AFF's a little bit ahead on that. Does the U.S. use first? I think we do not. I think Kulaki says the U.S. will not use first because we think we can deter conventional attacks. So once I determine that I don't necessarily think the status quo deters conventional attacks, I don't think that it means that the U.S. will not use first. And then obviously we've talked about Cunningham already. The DA impact, I agree that there is definitely an impact of the DA, and the link to the DA is large. I do think that this question of whether we take back the fissile material that we have given them is an interesting one, and I don't think that that's the same as the sanctions. Your evidence says the United States would not want to economically sanction them because it would hurt our economy and we're too intertwined with them. I don't think it goes so far as to say we would not want, we want them to nuclearize. I don't think we do, and so I don't think that says we would not take back the fissile material, or the IAEA would not necessarily take back the fissile material, even if they didn't do a more formalized sanction process. So I think at a minimum that slows down their ability to get things going in a nuclear fashion, and probably means that even if there is some form of preemption, that once the other countries realize that they don't have enough fissile material to get anything done, that it wouldn't happen. The other thing that was interesting is that there's sort of some tension between some of the evidence about what South Korea would be looking to do. I think some of the evidence for the negative says that they'd be looking to just get one, and then some of the negative evidence says they'd be looking for a more robust force. I think the AFF evidence is a little bit more conclusive that if they're going to do it, they're going to do it big, and so I think that implicates this fissile material thing, because even if they have enough fissile material for one, if they're only willing to do it if they do it big, that is a possible avenue for them to sort of change those calculus. Missile defense, I would really like an NEG card that addresses that directly. Obviously, I agree that the AFF evidence is a little bit old, and I do think that the way the 2NR explains this makes sense to me. That South Korea is not thrilled about the idea that we will just wait for someone to attack and then find out if our missile defense works. It's people have, I read a missile defense app in 1996 or something, and it didn't work then and it doesn't work now. But I do think that it somewhat changes the calculations, especially for the public, because the evidence does say that the existence of a missile defense, the public would be slowed down a little bit. So I do think that changes this a bit. Yeah, it has been a total pleasure. I've obviously not judged you as much as some of the folks in the room, although I think I've been judging Jordan since 2016. But it has been a real pleasure to get to do this, and congratulations on an excellent year and an excellent career.
I almost instinctively started asking questions. But
I mean, you can. We serve at the pleasure.
Yeah. Well, all I'll say is I'm pretty sure that if we took away nuclear material, that is a sanction under the UN. I don't think that's that important. That's in the nuclear suppliers group. That is a sanction, but whatever. Too late. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Great work.